Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all our nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everyone, and yes, I am back. I am fine. I am well. All is simpatico, or at least as simpatico as it can be. I do have to get stitches removed in 3 weeks, but once that's done, it will be the end of this particular medical drama cycle.
And I'm your host last time, more wannabe. He brings more pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing much better today than I was doing most of the weekend, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah, kind of same here. Had kind of a weird sleep schedule mix up early on during the weekend. Got that fixed last couple days.
Friday was just weird, guys. Seriously, Friday was just weird.
Yeah, and I won't get into it here. Dalton knows about it.
Yeah. So suffice it to say, while I was in the middle of being driven to the emergency room on Friday, Brainstormer also had life events happen.
Yeah.
We were kind of at cross purposes. Like, he was trying to explain it to me as I was going into the emergency room. It was weird, and I felt bad for cutting him off, but it was also like, I'm in the middle of going into the emergency room.
Right. Yeah, again, I'm not going to get too much to it. Everything's kind of resolved at this point. Yeah, it's nothing too major. It's, kind of one of those things that happens.
Yep. Again, Friday was just weird.
Yeah.
Friday the 18th of March 2022 will go down as one of those moments that makes me wonder if a certain fairy queen had anything to do with anything.
Yeah, so we got a lot of things to cover. Hopefully we can finish the thing we've been trying to finish for the last few weeks now. So we're going to pick off where we left off on the Hollywood consultant amidst restart of the wokeness epidemic. This is from humanevents.com. I don't remember the author, because I don't want to go back up because I just found the place where we left off on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you guys want, like every stream, in the description I leave the links to all the articles down below.
Yeah.
So
we cite our sources, so there's no allegations of misrepresenting or taking things out of context or anything like that. So if you want the sources, they are there.
Yeah, and don't worry, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna get a just like for the Star Wars article, we will cover in time again. I will make a similar playlist for this article as well, just so like everyone has full context.
I never thought of all the articles we've ever covered that this one would be one that would take so long.
Yeah,
I think it's because when we first started covering it, Corrupt came back and it kind of threw off our Well, I'm not gonna say it through auto rhythm. It's just that when he shows up, it stirs us into weird side tangents even more than we usually get into.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we?
Yep.
I don't know. You want me to start off a little beforehand, just so like we have the context, or
No, we can just jump into where we left off.
again, if 12 Clara is to be believed, individual factions of the show's fandom could number in the tens of thousands. Think what that says about how large the fandom as a whole was, and how thoroughly that could have affected America's entire adolescent population.
You, sir, don't know anything about fandom because every fandom has 10,000 subvariants, no matter how niche the the fandom in question is. Like as an example, me and a buddy of mine on Twitter, known as Sanctum Blog, for those who are wanting to look him up, we had a extended Twitter argument once over whether we thought the sapientness of Doctor Strange's cloak of levitation in the MCU was a good thing or not. So, and that's two people that are fairly amicable with each other because genuinely Sanctum Blog is a nice guy, and we the Doctor Strange fandom, despite the cumber bitches and whatnot, is a very niche fandom, and yet there's still a argument over the sapientness of Doctor Strange's cloak um, in the Doctor Strange fandom. So yeah, all fandoms have 10,000 subvariants, no matter how many or how few of them there are in the world.
Yeah,
It's just how fandoms work. You
I
just don't know how the internet works very much, must be.
I don't really have anything to say. So, moving on.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of effects, what actually happened as a result of this? Well, constantly enraged by the fact that their wish fulfillment wasn't being perfectly fulfilled on screen, and even more infuriated that other people had the gall to be okay with story decisions that felt like personal attacks. The Glee fandom transformed into a bellum omnium contra omnes. I mean,
Again, the problem here is that whoever this guy is who wrote this article simply just doesn't understand like the mechanics of how fandoms in general work because again, this is something that happens with every fandom. No matter how unified behind the various banners there are subvariants within subvariants, and there are turf wars within like okay, complete sidebar, but it'll give context for exactly what I mean. Back in the days of original Comicsgate, before Ethan Van Sciver and John Malin completely fucked over the entire movement. Cough, cough. Um, myself and a buddy of both myself and the channel, Eglantine, got into it with a YouTuber by the name of Yellow Flash because Yellow Flash wanted to use the blacklisting and censorship methods of what we at the time referred to as SJW Marvel on the SJW Marvel creators themselves. And Eglantine and I were on the side of the whole reason we're mad at them is because they're doing this shit to us, so we should advocate for this shit to stop, full stop. And there was an entire month-long turf war where basically Yellow Flash would get on live streams with that Umbrella guy and bitch about myself and Eglantine, and then not even have the decency to leave the stream up for posterity. He would get drunk and bitch about me and Eglantine for 2 hours, and then delete the stream. It was funny, especially when you consider that he called me a dick sucker, not realizing, I guess, that I was gay. Greatest insult fail ever. But yeah, that's the kind of shit that internet fandoms in particular get up to. We will find incredibly facile turf wars to have, and not gonna lie, sometimes it can be fun, actually. Like I will always have a slight soft spot for Yellow Flash now, just because he was the first YouTuber I ever had YouTuber turf wars with. And yes, I'm aware Yellow Flash has matured in the years since that happened, so don't anybody think I'm trying to start shit with him again. It's just I find I find that he was kind of the first controversy I ever had on YouTube kind of amusing, and I find even more amusing how incompetent he was at it and
Mm.
how he got mad at us for laughing at how incompetent he was at it. But nevertheless,
Yeah.
moving on.
Well, I did want to point out, just for the sake, I don't know why he put this in here, which was Bellum Omnium Contra Omnes, I think, actually, which is translated to the best of Google Translate, war of all against all.
It's a term that it's a phrase that gets thrown out every great now and again, but I'm convinced this guy employed it just to prove how smart he is. I'm thinking it's one of those pseudo intellectual flex kind of things, like of tee hee guys, I can pull out obscure Latin when I feel like it. Doesn't that make me sound so much more sophisticated? Yeah, no, it just makes you sound like a pretentious punter. And I should know. Because I default to that level of pretentiousness. But but much like Agent J in Men in Black, the difference between you and me is I make this look good.
Right. All right. Fight that war, more than mere personal desire and preference would be necessary to achieve victory. These things would have been intellectualized, and so the Glee fandom cast about and found critical theory and absorbed its narcissistic message that basically enabled you to cry racism, sexism, homophobia, etc. at anything, because what they really were after was a way to demand that nothing ever happen on the show that didn't make them feel personally fulfilled.
See, no, this is a reversal of causation you've done here. It's not that people felt this way and then looked for critical theory in order to validate it. It's that critical theory was already inculcated in the show and begat those feelings in their viewer base, or that the viewer base was comprised of people that were already somewhat familiar with critical theory because this was the art school mentality de jour for most of the early 2010s. And that slowly made its way into particularly fandom communities, and then in particularly fandom communities, there begat a backlash along the vein of things like Gamergate, Comicsgate, and the Fandom Menace. That's how it works. The art school pricks force critical theory narratives into stories. An audience formed around those stories, partially informed by that same mentality, and then they fed on each other and became infinitely more facile and pretentious as it went on. And eventually there was a backlash amongst those of us that opposed those ideologies, and then begat the toxic fandom narrative. Now, you have the causality completely flipped here. Moving on.
Right. They threatened each other with death. This war was so fierce, and when it was over, while they slunk away bleeding, miserable, and full of regret that they had ever let themselves be driven so mad by a freaking TV show, the damage was done.
Okay, that's just those particular people being
Well,
essentially essentially filthy casuals is what that is. Because in actual fandoms, you don't ever feel guilty for engaging in the bullshit. In fact, if anything, most often genuine fans are off off-put by the idea that they should feel bad for engaging in the bullshit, because we all understand the notion that the insults and the bants and the flippancy is part of the fun. And we also understand the notion that someone yelling, "Go get raped in a fire," doesn't actually mean, "I wish for you to go get raped in a fire." It's usually just a more elaborate way of saying, "Shut the fuck up, cunt." But that might, in fact, be the difference between the for lack of a better word, anti-SJW types of fandom and the SJW types of fandom. When we say things like "go get raped in a fire," we understand it as humor, whereas because the people who are more social justicely inclined tend to be overdramatic, maybe they don't possess the software to tell the difference between sincere advocations of death threats and jokes. Because when part of your fandom requires you to be morally charged, you tend to be a more pretentious twit than if you're just being flippant for the sake of flippancy. Moving on. Last brainstormer left to do a thing. In which case, I shall attempt to endeavor to deal with the chat. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Went to get water, and then I also put food away. It's kind of my job, so. Okay, so. They had already absorbed the intellectual patterns of critical theory and were now determined to inflict this same overly personal, emotionally toxic relationship to media on every other fandom they entered. Again, 12 Clara in the ownership, emphasis mine. It was almost like the word problematic became the Bible of Glee. It was like, this is your way to instantly prove somebody else wrong. Then people were instantly shut down. It was the be all end all of an argument.
See, this I think might be 12 Clara being a little bit narcissistic, which if what she's describing is accurate, then I don't think her being a narcissist is a terribly out of left field supposition. I think she sees things that are common to all fandoms, but because she has to be the super special one, she only sees it in regards to her own fandom. But in truth, this is something that to some degree happens in all fandoms and isn't a grassroots phenomena from actual people, but is the result of the art school mentality that was making inroads into Hollywood around the time of the early 2010s or thereabouts. It's not that 12 Clara and her cronies created this. They are the outcome of it, more or less, I think.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Okay. Bell Chronal Enforcement Division. We here, are you here?
Yes, we are here. I think Chrono's brain might just be having another bipolar moment. I'm not sure that's a complete thought, but okay. Moving on.
I'm sure the most times anybody's ever used the word in history were probably during the days of Glee. it sort of infiltrated the vocabulary, and everybody left Glee, and they went to their new fandoms. We all took that with us.
No, but see, this is the thing. It didn't come from Glee. Glee was just one of the earliest public examples of it. The term problematic in its modern usage started in academia, and then those academics infiltrated the arts and culture, and then fandoms of narcissistic identitarian teenagers glommed onto the examples in popular culture, largely because they were already slowly being inculcated into this style of mentality by their high schools and or by the infiltration of this academic ideology into their high schools. Again, I think in his endeavor to pwn Glee, our dear author has completely inverted the order of causation. And because 12 Clara is a narcissist who wants to see herself as the special, he was able to use her as an example of what he was talking about because she in turn had her own inversion of causality to deal with. But in 12 Clara's case, it's because she largely doesn't know about the greater context of deconstructionalist critical theory or Frankfurt School mentality. But in our dear author's case, he knows about those things, and yet for some reason still has the causation flipped, largely because I think he wants to turn it into a conservative versus liberal fight and a young versus old fight instead of actually addressing it as it happens. And this, kids, is why partisanship makes people do stupid things. Because if you're more concerned about honing your enemies than actually developing an accurate model, this is what happens. You flip causation as and when it's convenient, instead of actually observing things as they are. Moving on.
Okay. Glee gave us all language to talk about the problems we were seeing in media that we may not have seen before. I would say the sweet spot in age for Glee at the time was probably like 14 or 15 to early 20s. For a lot of people, this is the first time they were coming to contact with identity politics, and this was the first time we were coming into contact with each other and these other identities.
Yeah, but the thing is, it wasn't the first time the people who made Glee wanted to make it, which is why around the same time that Glee happened, you also had Legend of Korra instituting these same kind of themes into the Avatar universe, or you had Ben 10 Omniverse deconstructing the otherwise serious action cartoon that Alien Force and Ultimate Alien had been up until that point.
And then you do watch it again. Anyway, Dragon Turtle. The classic "you kids are responsible for every problem in society" thing.
Yes. What kills me though about this particular author is he knows about deconstructionalist critical theory. He knows about the Frankfurt School, and yet he still thinks Glee is somehow more accountable to the problems of this particular generation than the things that helped inspire Glee, i.e., deconstructionalist critical theory and the Frankfurt School mentality in art schools.
Yes. Yeah, I saw it with my fucking eye. Okay, Dragon Turtle. It seems to be something hardwired into people, and to be fair, not without reason. Anything in the majority discriminates against the minority. The old/traditional conflict with the new/progressive.
Well, the funny thing is, they both basically end up advocating for the same shit eventually because they don't really understand each other all that well. Because the progressives don't really understand tradition enough to effectively counter it, and the traditionalists usually cling to a idealistic version of the past that is not true, and or they actually and this is something I've noticed about the traditionalist set that I wish they would stop. They actually internalize the straw man of the progressives. They actually do think, for example, that women were ever historically oppressed, or that the Civil War was about race, or that, and they internalize the guilt for that. And I think if we all just collectively realized the people I oppose are still people and therefore have as complex and nuanced reasons for believing what they believe as I do, we could solve a lot of that. Because a large part of the reason why history continuously repeats itself is because the traditionalists want to return to an idealistic past that never existed while simultaneously blaming themselves for the problems of the past that also never existed, and the progressives want to fight a form of tradition that never existed, and usually wind up inadvertently, therefore, advocating for the exact same institution of traditionalism.
Right. Right, so Giant Turtle. Easy. He's using the if you aren't with me, you are against me mentality, or at the very least, going after anything that looks leftist.
Yeah, and that's why it's not that he's entirely without reason. Like, there is a point somewhere in here, I think. It's just that the way he's viewing the point that he has is isolated from the broader context, and therefore allowing him to flip causation as and when it's convenient. But that's why we're here, to hopefully set this straight. Anyway, moving back to the article.
Also, ow.
What happened?
Well, I was checking my phone. I was checking my phone real quick to see if I got anything like text or anything. I get random text all the time. And like I was putting it back, and I accidentally dropped it on my foot.
Ah.
It doesn't like hurt or anything, but fuck.
Mm.
Anyway, yeah. Okay. That really is a staple now of Tumblr in a way I didn't see as much before Glee. That was kind of the end of that. I probably should have finished that before you started talking about it.
Okay, well, the fact is that Tumblr was where those sorts of artsy fartsy academics met up, so it was going to turn into that regardless, and it already had started to turn into that long before Glee showed up. The only thing Glee did was act as the originating example, or one of the originating examples. But as I just got through listing, it was far from the only example at the time. It's just that the powers that be in the art schools and so forth, or the art school educated creatives and or journalists, began their onslaught of inserting those themes into stories around that same time, which is why you saw a lot of different franchises and shows exhibiting that same mentality, because it was the approved aristocratic moral framework to operate within at the time. And it still is being considered, at least by the powers that be, to be the appropriate approved framework. The problem is, as usual, the aristocrats are out of touch, and the peasants have a completely different worldview. But they refuse to acknowledge it. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. In other words, a group of people who numbered at minimum in tens of thousands and could have numbered in the tens of millions became so obsessed with the TV show and with characters they related to that they went and indoctrinated themselves with critical theory just so they could more effectively complain whenever the show did something they didn't like. And
No, and again, as I go ahead, sorry.
whenever the show did something they didn't like, and harass anyone who disagreed. without consequence. Okay, go.
See, no, again, you have the causation flipped. They were already inculcated into critical theory, and that's why Glee worked on them and or exasperated things that they already believed. It's not that Glee led them to critical theory, it's that critical theory essentially created the artistic landscape and environment that led to Glee. And also Legend of Korra and Ben 10 Omniverse, and I could go on. Moving forward.
Okay. And when this toxicity ruined the show for them, they then spread this behavior to the fandoms of every other art form and even carried it with them into adult life as participants in America's cultural institutions.
And no, again, it wasn't the fans of these shows that brought these ideas into um the arts. It was the the creatives, the actual people behind the cameras of these various shows and movies that created the environment that allowed these kind of fans to flourish. And a large percentage of these kind of fans were actually the late teen, early 20 college age educated people that would then proceed to go into occupations like journalism and the arts to further inculcate this into fandom. Ironically, this is one of the reasons why the right fails to correctly diagnose things about the left, quote unquote. Because the right sees everything in individualistic terms, they fail to see the notion of networking and social interaction as a force. So they prefer to reduce everything down to the actions of individuals rather than the actions of systems or groups. And likewise, the left will always get the right wrong because they constantly see things in terms of systems and groups and networking and never account for the crystallized individual actors. Moving on.
Yep. There's no other way to put this. This interview and the Tumblr post that preceded it form a confession. These girls, it almost certainly was mostly girls, were so incapable of telling the difference between fiction and reality, so desperate to pretend that it was them reflected on screen in a glorific teenage music review, whatever, that they went to the trouble of intellectualizing their discontent through critical theory, and then took the same mission that animated the wars over Glee on Tumblr into the real world and into real professions in real industries with real consequences.
Mm, and again, no. That entire section was nothing but you projecting your own suppositions onto this. What happened, sir, was that critical theory took over the arts and then tried to pander to children so as to inculcate them into critical theory, which was already partially being done by the education that these children were receiving, and partially by the fact that children are by children in their teenage years are always going to be identity obsessed more than the average person because they're trying to figure out their own identities. So critical theory comes along like the freaking Pied Piper of Hamelin of this particular metaphor and tells them you're right to be narcissistically obsessed with the parameters of your own ideology, your own identity, and let me give you the tools to do that more effectively. And then those kids become the astroturf, quote unquote, grassroots that inevitably the powers that be want to pander to. That's that's the other part of this. And this is something I wish I could get through the heads of some of the people on our side. The reason why they the reason why these corporations actively choose to pander to the SJW sets, but they don't ever actively choose to pander to us, is because they actually, on some level, believe more in they have more in common with the SJWs than they do with the anti-SJWs, because a lot of the modern day millionaires and billionaires grew up in the 80s, where the stock mustache twirling villain trope was played by the reaching fat cat capitalist. And so a large part of the people who eventually became billionaires, your Zuckerbergs, your Bezoses, and so on and so forth, actually have what I guess we could, for the sake of argument, call capitalist guilt. So they are capitalists, but they also, because again, they were raised to believe that capitalism was a bad thing, have a hatred of capitalism. And the way they justify this to themselves is in something analogous to the following: capitalism is bad, but if I, as a capitalist, choose to use capitalism to undermine itself, then I get to be the one good capitalist because I'm actually advocating to reform capitalism or to destroy it. And that means that I'm using the power that I have as a capitalist better than the people who just straight up want to make a profit. That's why, for example, Disney panders to social justice warriors all the time, but never panders to the other side of the equation, because the SJWs are the fans they actually want to have, because they're the ones that they actually, on some level, understand. Because the rich middle class, usually people who become SJWs, have more in common with the rich upper class people who usually believe, on some level, in the ideology of social justice in their own heads. Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. And just like they insisted that the actors on Glee live out their personal wish fulfillment fantasies, the autonomy of these actors be damned. They are now insisting that all of us play the parts they have written for us in a political fanfic, while they transform all the United States not into a utopia, but into an eternal fantasy high school where our new woke overlords, like the New Directions, will be constantly validated by everyone around them while still being able to claim oppression.
But okay, see, this part I disagree with them on, because a fandom is entirely justified in wanting the products that they purchase or the products that they are invested in to cater to their whims. It would be mind-numbingly hypocritical of me to disagree with that, because I'm sorry, but if you are an actor in an IP that has a fan base, your first duty is to that fan base. No matter which side of the political divide you're on, if you are engaging with a fandom, your duty is to please that fandom in the same way as any other business uh, owner's job is to please their customers. And I'm not going to all of a sudden agree with you that that would be a bad thing just because I happen to disagree with the people that it's being pandered to. My thinking is, let the marketplace of ideas work as intended, but the thing ironically is, as we've seen in recent years especially, Glee, Glee and shows like it have their fans, however misguided they may be. But they don't, what what's wrong with the Glee mentality is the Glee mentality is not therefore exportable to every other fandom. And every other fandom needs to in turn have their own space, i.e., make your Glees and your Legends of Korra, but don't be surprised when the niche of that group is very small, insular, and contains a lot of infighting, and the average person and or the average consumer of fandom doesn't like it. And likewise, let the let the franchises that actually do pander to what we could call, for the sake of argument, genuine nerds also exist. But that's where the SJWs completely make hypocrites of themselves, because they want a world where they and they alone are the ones who it is acceptable to pander to. Because we're the moral superiors, don't you know? And if you pander to anyone other than us, you're an amoral person, don't you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My solution is let everyone pander to everyone they want to, but don't be surprised when in the marketplace of ideas and the marketplace of, well, you know, the actual marketplace, certain IPs do better than others. I.e., a movie like Joker is probably going to do better than a movie like Birds of Prey, because just like back in the 90s when, the proto Pureflix movies happened, nobody outside of the fundamentalist evangelical tradcons wanted to watch those, so they remained niche, and when you inserted Christian themes into blockbusters, they usually didn't work. Now, when you insert feminist themes into modern day blockbusters, they're probably going to be less successful, or at the very least successful with a smaller niche of people, because people in general prefer consistent characters in consistent worlds with three-dimensional personas over moralistic authoritarian propaganda pieces of any kind. Moving on.
Before we do Dragon Turtle. In other words, this is about at 8:38, by the way. In other words, special pleading, same thing for the I'm part of the proletariat, because even though I have a six-figure salary, I don't own the business. That, or they are actually dirt poor and just blame everyone else for it.
See, but generally speaking, that is a lot less common. That second one is a lot less common. Most poor people understand the notion of ambition actually better than the people who already have everything, because when you have nothing, you understand that the things you don't have are valuable, whereas when you have everything, nothing seems valuable, and therefore you can rationalize in your own head why it's okay to appropriate the aesthetics and the victimhood of the working class by dressing in thrift store chic. Not because you actually need to dress in thrift store chic, mind you, but because you want to. And likewise, you'll often see extremely poor people trying to look more wealthy than their station would normally allow, because even though they don't have all the resources, they understand the value of those resources better than those who already have them. They're actually more appreciative. It's why when a poor person wins the lottery, they get all sorts of fancy shit. Whereas when a rich person or a person with upper middle class wealth wins the lottery, they usually wind up looking like hipster Rasputin, a la Jack Dorsey or Jeff Bezos, because they already have everything, so they can afford to be the victims. Whereas the actual victims would very much like a situation where they weren't the victims anymore.
Oh, Giant Turtle. One, I am making this for money slash the fans slash fame slash etc. and thus must give them what they want. Two, I'm doing this for art slash myself and won't complain if people don't like it uh, and don't watch it. Either way, don't dismiss niche markets slash fan bases. Everyone seems to think niche is a dirty word nowadays, or something to use as a stepping stone to get big, bending them when they get big enough. It's all about mainstream or the mythical universal appeal, the wider audience fallacy, I call it.
Well, okay, but this is I do disagree with you slightly here because one of the great things about modern day civilization is it does allow things that used to be niche to gain a more universal appeal. That's why, for example, um, in the 90s or thereabouts, the MCU probably wouldn't have worked, but it does now because we've all slowly but surely been dragged to the conclusion of those people we made fun of for being nerds yesterday actually had a point. And I think that is a perfectly sane and rational position. It's basically meritocracy. When things that are niche but prove themselves become popular, that's meritocracy working as intentioned. I don't think you should aspire to nicheness. I think you should aspire that one day your niche will prove itself. However, I do support the idea that there should be pluralism in society and that there should be a meritocracy whereby everyone gets to the starting line of presenting their opinions to the public, and then the public is eventually convinced one way or the other as to which is better. I think it's extremely hipstery and ironically deconstructionist to lionize nicheness because in a sane world, we do want to convince people that we have at least a worthwhile answer, if not necessarily the right answer, and that's the difference. The difference of I have something of value versus I have the only thing of value. That's that's where it becomes quote unquote toxic is when your answer is the only available answer and the only acceptable answer.
Uh, Dragon Turtle, but what I was talking about with the wider audience fallacy is abandoning the previous thing for the mainstream. It isn't the niche becoming mainstream, it's the thing trading up.
Yeah, that I agree with you. You shouldn't shun your original fan base honestly for any reason ever because it makes no sense to do so.
Right.
But nor should we be ashamed when the fans were right all along, i.e., when Kevin Feige went to Sony and Fox respectively in the 90s and 2000s and said, "I have this really great idea for a Marvel universe," um, and they all laughed him out, and he said, "Okay, fine, I'll do it myself," and then the MCU becomes the biggest franchise on the planet. We should celebrate that because that is the prudish, short-sighted fuddy-duddies being proven wrong, and the genuine, passionate, nerdy guys being proven right. And that to me is win state, is when everyone stops with this, your kind of art is an inferior kind of art until proven otherwise bullshit. But that being said, there will always be meritocracy. So you can't just say, oh, people were just not smart enough to understand my thing, and that's why it didn't do well. No, you have to actually examine and make the case, make the argument. And usually, all other things being equal, the argument will make a difference.
Right. Right. Dragon Turtle, I lionize nicheness because I see what happens when things go mainstream. In short, lowest common denominator, milking money, and pearl clutcher getting involved.
Eh, but I think as per most things in these sorts of arguments, the solution is don't assume that popularity means it has to become the lowest common denominator. That is usually where the failing starts, is people when people assume that the average person is stupid, they actually end up alienating the average person, because no matter how much the aristocracy wants to believe we're all mindless drones who don't think for ourselves, yeah, no, as I will say until the day I die, people are people, and they have their own personal narratives of themselves being at least important to the overall scheme of things.
Continuing what he said before,
Mhm.
it almost seems like mainstream is where things go to die.
Only when the mainstream has a sickness. When when civilization as a whole is healthy, we get movies like we get we get years like 1994. In 1994, there were at least three. Now there were at least three movies, um, now considered classics, nominated for Best Picture. It was Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump, and I forget what the other one was. But there were at least three movies that are now considered classics, nominated for Best Picture in 1994. And they were all mainstream blockbuster hits, unlike now where the artistic class has absolute contempt for anything that goes mainstream. Um, Whereas now, the artistic class has contempt for everything that goes mainstream, and because of the bass-backwards ideologies of the Frankfurt School and deconstructionalist critical theory, the overall quality has actually gone down, at least in the areas where the mainstream is allowed to exist. I say cure the mainstream, don't bemoan the mainstream. That's my solution. We should purge the mainstream of this bass-backwards ideology, and then all other things will be at least closer to equal, and a meritocracy that actually makes sense will begin to function again.
Right. Okay. Moving on.
Yep.
Um, this the reality of wokeness. It is not a utopian philosophy. It isn't even really a leftist one, though it uses leftist language to mark its true intentions. No, what it is a sad, pathetic teenage wish fulfillment fantasy, a reactionary ideology determined not to move forward but to restore the power dynamics of high school. The one place where the woke have ever had any power, or where petty, cruel, emotional infants like them can ever have power.
See, I agree with him at least partially here. I will agree that I don't think wokeness or social justice is necessarily a reflection of leftism, because I, for example, am a um, Andrew Yang, Bernie Sanders, and Tulsi Gabbard-esque social democrat, but as everyone who knows me knows, I ain't no freaking SJW, and I never will be. That being said, I think this is a function of all kinds of moral authoritarianism, that they are all this petty and cliquish and juvenile. The only difference is where the hierarchy is set. The the ideal, like, tradcon evangelical society is one in which everything resembles the um, suburban community action members style of society. The universe where like the Martha Tisdales and Bree Vandy camps control everything, where the Helen Lovejoys, can organize community action, or block parties and bake sales and things. The wokeness, or the social justice authoritarians want everything to be like high school. And on some level, I think the TradCon evangelicals would be fine with a high school too. It would just be a high school from Leave It to Beaver instead of a high school circa 2010. But it's still the petty, childish, cliquish bullshit. It's just in the TradCon high school of this metaphor, instead of people like Sharpay Evans being the villain or Regina George being the villain, they'd actually win. Moving on now.
Right. Okay. Right. Nitro, you support Bernie? Unsubscribing now. Just though, didn't expect that.
Yeah, no, I supported Bernie both in 2016 and 2020, and my second and third choices were Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. And next time around, ideally, the candidates would either be Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, or Ro Khanna on the left-wing side, and Trump and DeSantis probably on the right-wing side. See, the thing is, while I personally am, I'm on the left policy-wise, I do understand. I do subscribe to the notion that there does need to be a balance. See, unlike most people, I'm not actually against the two-party system. What I'm against is the current paradigm of the two-party system. If the paradigm made sense, if it was populist, non-interventionalist left versus populist, non-interventionalist right, I think them playing ping pong back and forth would make perfect sense. Like if we had one term of Trump and DeSantis followed by one term of Ro Khanna and Andrew Yang, that would actually, I think, be a system that could sustain itself. The problem is, instead of that, we have one side that is the prudish neocons, like your Mitt Romneys and your Ted Cruz's, versus your prudish neo-libs, like John Delaney and fucking Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. And meanwhile, both actual grassroots part of both parties, i.e. the populist Trump supporting right and the populist Bernie, Tulsi, and Yang supporting left, get left out in the cold, and the only examples of the same that make it to power are the crazy out there ones like the Squad. And I do think that the extreme left part of the party on the Democratic side and the extreme establishment part of the Democratic Party will probably end up coming to blows and destroying each other. Like the AOCs and the Hillary Clintons will probably end up killing each other off, and then it'll be left for the Yangs, Tulsis, and Ro Khannas to essentially act as the sensible middle option, the sensible middle position. That's what I think. I think a world in which the paradigm makes sense will probably end up resolving a lot of things, but as right now, neither side of the paradigm makes sense. So the solution is Trump and DeSantis on the Republican side, and probably Ro Khanna and Andrew Yang on the Democratic side going at it. Because then, no matter which side you go with, there will actually be a meaningful option. Whereas now, no matter which side you go with, it's an establishment stooge who wants to do nothing to actually help anyone.
Okay, so I'm going to read Dragon Turtles thing, and then we're going to try and finish. Then we're going to finish this article and move on.
Yep.
Okay, so Dragon Turtle, the challenge is getting rid of prudes without trading them for hedonistic degenerates. Not saying it isn't possible, but it's tough and you never have full control over societal change.
See, but the thing is, I think I I would rather risk a world where people are quote unquote too free than a world in which they are not free enough. Because a world in which people are too free always has the option of people uh exerc exercising individual will, whereas a world where everything is moralistic and prudish doesn't make any allowances for for individual moral will regardless.
Um, Alright, so Dragon Turtle, ironically, the left have both lean and anime with feminine females while making Pride a fetish parade.
Yeah, the old school meme of like I just want to march to my friend's gay wedding with my gun open carry. It is very much the sort of sensible middle option that I think we all sort of want to default to. Of like I just want all the freedoms necessary and none of the interventionalism.
Alright, so let's try and finish this article.
Yep.
But even in the confession of one of those infants, there is hope. For as soon as these children experiencing the high school wish fulfillment fantasy they think they want, they soon regret creating it. Look at 12 Clara such Aaron. She speaks for days in the Glee fandom as a solipsistic nightmare, punctuated by endless persecution from other people. And are her goals more modest now? I'll let her answer. Uh, uh, I did my time. Now I just want to enjoy things in peace and have a critical discussion about them when necessary, and not every waking minute of the day.
See, that's a perfectly reasonable, I suppose, compromise position. I would still advocate that maybe you should put the critical discussion away because critical theory has done nothing but ruin all of civilization every time it is employed. And I think art should exist for its own sake and not for some kind of socio-political utilitarianism. But that being said, that is a much more sensible position than the usual SJW position of everything is political and you have to point it all out, a la Annie Sarkeesian. That being said, um, yeah, no, unfortunately, sir, 12 Clara is actually kind of an outlier among her side. Normally, what happens is um, they they tire of one paradigm, but they don't actually abandon the paradigms. They just stack more layers on top of it. That's what intersectionality is. It's not we need to stop doing the high school click bullshit. It's just we need to fine tune the high school click that we want. And to be fair, on the anti SJW side, there seems to be a certain streak of people who want to do the same thing just with different clicks, a la a Professor Geek or a Fourth Age, constantly going on and on and on about how art should be utilitarian, but it should be utilitarian in a Jungian or Joseph Campbellian sense rather than a Frankfurt School sense. And the problem in both cases is that first part, in my opinion. Art shouldn't be utilitarian. It should be valuable for its own sake and on its own terms. Art doesn't exist to serve humanity. Humanity is a mirror for art. Our job is to find good art, not to control it.
Hmm. Grand Turtle's not too free. That would be people who aren't mature enough for their freedom. Also, intersectionality, collectivisms, simulacrum of individualism, viz. Venn diagrams of infinite categories.
It's it really does it really isn't that hard once you start thinking more in terms of consistent principles rather than partisan label shifting chicanery. It if you can get to the point where you can look at both the TradCon evangelicals and the Frankfurt School deconstructionalists and say, you guys want the same thing, you're just fighting over who gets to control that thing, it becomes a lot easier because then it's just nobody gets to ban anything, nobody gets to censor anything, we just need to have the argument. Yeah. Which is why I try my hardest to make sure that whenever the quote unquote right wing does trend that way, I can be here to point out that they're being hypocritical and stupid. Because I don't want to replace social justice with yet another strand of TradCon evangelical family values. My solution is the middle pillar of small L libertarianism, large L libertarianism, classical liberalism, and on the far side, maybe a little bit of social democracy. No communism and no fascism, just populist, non-interventionalist humanism.
All right. Last part. Here, for the sake of America, let us hope that, understanding wokeness for the pathetic Mary Sue power fantasy that it is, we can finally laugh in its face as it deserves and return to a world where the entire West can, once more, enjoy things in peace.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, but in his term, that
Yeah, and he's probably kind of a fourth age or Professor Geek type, where instead of the socio-political utilitarianism, it's just Jungian and Campbellian utilitarianism instead. And at that point, I will be here saying the exact same things in the hope that people eventually get the idea that I was serious the whole time. Like, no, I wasn't just saying we need to stop this because I disagree with one side or the other. I disagree with both sides because the entire paradigm you're both operating in is FUBAR.
I don't know. Okay, sorry, I was okay. So Dragon Turtle. Before we move on to the next article, important point of nuance. They don't want the same thing. They are just the same in the way it matters to us. Conservatives and fascists, commies, libertarians, all sort of see the others that way because it's true based on which values each find important.
See, no, this is where I'm going to be slightly horseshoe theory-y about this, because ask a sex-negative feminist why they don't like the male gaze, and then ask a fundamentalist Muslim why women have to wear the burqa. It's usually the same argument, i.e., because men's gaze is somehow harmful to women, therefore we need to protect women from men's ability to look at them. The only difference is the fundamentalist Muslim looks at that paradigm and says, therefore the woman needs to take responsibility and cover herself up, whereas the hardcore intersectional sex negative feminist goes, therefore men need to take the responsibility and avert their eyes and not look. It becomes the same argument regardless. Both can somehow find a way to put women in burqas. It's just a matter of in the feminist case, they think women shouldn't have to. It should be the man's responsibility to simply avert his eyes or remove them, depending on how rad femme they are. And in the Muslim case, they at least find some kind of sensible position of like, if men are bestial and rapey and their gaze is harmful, we should therefore have the women cover themselves up. But I would look at that and say men aren't bestial and rapey in general, and neither of these positions make sense. But that, of course, makes me a uber heretical MRA, and nobody likes MRAs because we all like the women worsting.
I don't really have anything to say. Shall we?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is something I wanted to really cover during February, and we're just now getting around to it because obviously we were busy at February.
Yeah, we were doing Valentine's Day themed things in February.
Yeah. So this is from motherjones.com. The insider story of the banning of mouse or moss. I think it's mouse. It's dumber than you think. This is by David Korn, published February 1st, 2022. Um, okay, so Dragon Turtle. I'm trying to comment. I mean it like this. Libertarians care about freedom and commies. Fascists both hate it. Commies, it's equality, and the other two are against it. Fascists want tradition, sort of, and national slash race. Ra- ra- I don't know how to say that one. Cultural slash religious unity, and the other two don't care about that. The thing that they care about, the other two lack.
Yeah, but the thing is, effectively, all that amounts to is a change of the terminology. As I explained in the feminist male gaze versus Islamic modesty example, and I specifically chose those two because they are both at the extreme end of their respective horseshoes. Um, in the feminist mindset, the reason why the male gaze is bad is because men are bad and therefore men should avert their eyes. In the extremely traditionalist Islamic mindset, men are still bad and should avert their eyes, but women should at least take the responsibility of covering themselves up. But neither of these positions countenance the idea that maybe men aren't bad, and that's how you know they're effectively the same thing, because you can take any position that either side advocates and change out the terminology, and all of a sudden it's it becomes either justifiable or unjustifiable depending. It's like those researchers who took Mein Kampf and changed every instance of Jew to white and every instance of Aryan to BIPOC, and actually managed to get several excerpts of Mein Kampf published in this way in feminist approved journals,
Um,
because it's literally like playing Mad Libs most of the time.
okay. Dragon Turtle. That is true, but this way you also can get inside of their heads easier.
Well, I have no problem getting inside their heads. I just also have the wherewithal to maintain a consistent axis in the middle. Like I know most of the feminist justifications, and I know most of the traditionalist justifications because I study a lot of history, and I've actually, and this is the tricky thing. This is the part I think that makes all the difference. I actually listen to what people say, not to the implications of what people say from my own head. Because that is where both sides tend to go wrong. They read something that the other side says, and rather than take them at their word, they come up with all sorts of nefarious justifications. Whereas I look at both sides in their most academically outlined forms and take them at their word. For example, the modern day feminist appropriation of the witch trials comes from the notion that the reason why witch trials exist is because misogyny and historical oppression of women. But if you actually read what the church fathers and clerics of the Middle Ages actually said during the Burning Times, the justification for the witchcraft trials usually was women get accused more often because women have more sexual power and therefore need to be more responsible with it. Because witchcraft was, in the witch hunter's mind, an extension of the sin of lust. Because, according to the Malleus Maleficarum, and I quote, all witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable. And the thought was, according to the early church fathers, that witchcraft was essentially a misuse of the generative instinct that would normally be going towards creating new life. And that's why witchcraft was considered bad, because it was wasting your generative impulse. But of course, feminists never actually read what the people who actually committed the witch trials actually thought, and if they do, they come up with all sorts of post hoc rationalizations for it rather than actually taking them at their word.
Right. All right. Giant Turtle, I wouldn't say take them at their word. Their word is often not worth the air it's carried on.
Okay, maybe not, but listen to them when they describe themselves and how they describe themselves, I guess is what my point is. I.e., when someone outlines the theory of why I'm doing X, don't say, you're not actually doing X because of the reasons you've outlined. You're doing X because of this other completely fabricated justification that I've come up with in my own head. I.e., acknowledge that they are justified within their own worldview. It's just that their own worldview is fucked. Because everybody wants to see themselves as the good guy. The only difference is, how do they define what it means to be the good guy? Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Go. One of my favorite books is Mouse: A Survivor's Tale, Art Spiegelman's brilliant 1986 graphic novel that recounts his parents' harrowing experiences during the Holocaust when they were imprisoned in Auschwitz. In the book, Jews are depicted as mice, Germans as cats, Poles as pigs. It is a richly and simply drawn blend of history, fiction, and memoir. It captures the story of the survivors, their trauma, and the consequences for their son. The book is a complete artistic success, hailed widely as a masterpiece and awarded a Pulitzer, first ever handed to a graphic novel. Not to overstate Mouse's significance, its publication legitimized this form of storytelling and marked a historic moment in American literature. In 1992, the Museum of Modern Art mounted an exhibition displaying Spiegelman's original panels for the work. 2 weeks ago, a Tennessee school board voted to ban the book.
Yeah. And see, okay, I kind of. This is going to be difficult. While Mouse is good and moving and everything, I don't think it. I don't think it was this revelatory thing that a lot of people think it was, and I think a large part of its alleged importance comes from the same kind of mentality that I am universally against, which is using art as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. So that being said, while I acknowledge that Mouse is a perfectly nice comic, and I'm certainly not advocating for it to be banned or anything, I also don't share the hipstery art school approach of creaming myself over it. It was a good comic, but it's not as special as they think it is, because in my opinion, comics don't need works like Mouse to be legitimized, because comics, right, were already legitimate, and they've been legitimate all along.
So full disclosure, I don't really know what Mouse is. Like, I get what it's about. I've never looked into it. It was never something that really appealed to me per se.
Mm-hmm.
Um, really, the only things I've read about, like the Holocaust and stuff, which is not something I really look into on my own accord, simply because I find it's just not really the thing I'm really interested in looking into, because we cover it so much in school, specifically high school. So
It's boring. It's boring. They turn most American history courses into the Civil War and then World War II and nothing the fuck else usually.
not entirely wrong, but we covered it a lot in my literature class when I was a sophomore, specifically that of guys, it was an autobiography. We watched a documentary about it. I can't remember who it was. And I feel really bad because it was actually really good.
Anne Frank?
No, no, it was a guy who was in Auschwitz. Um, got separated from his family and stuff.
The Boy in the Striped Pajamas?
No, it wasn't fiction. It was autobiographical.
Hmm, interesting.
I can't remember it. God, yeah. We covered so much in that year, actually, like a lot of things, from Shakespeare to that autobiography. Giant Turtle, How to Become Legitimate, How the Elites Like It. That's 90% of it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, kind of. According to society, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, I will go to my grave fighting against that exact mentality.
Right, but again, it's not entirely something I really gravitate towards, just because it's a very harrowing thing, and I'm
Mhm.
not saying like yeah. Plus, to be honest, no one really talked about this like where I was at. You know,
Mm.
like I never really
And
saw.
I don't gravitate towards it mostly because I always hate when the only answer to let's make comics legitimate is to remove like the superheroic elements of them, because then you get people who go, I like comics fine, I just don't like all the cape shit. And then I point out, well, cape shit, as you put it, is 90% of comics. Therefore, you
Right,
only like the exceptions to the rule.
right. What I mean is, again, like, it's just it never really came up like mouse never really came up in terms of any circles I was in at the time of my youth. I think I saw like someone brought it in, like an artist, when I was in an art club in middle school, and he brought it in. I don't really remember it. I didn't check it out because I was busy working on some things.
Wonder if it was Art Spiegelman himself. That would have been interesting.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was kind of a young dude, I think. I don't remember. I don't remember a lot of my school days. Honestly, it all just really blurred together.
Yeah, I think I knew about Mouse before because I remember seeing it in the library and I remember seeing it in like school book fairs and stuff. But the first time I became apprised of what it was and actually bothered to read it was in college because I was a member of the college comic club.
You guys are a comic club?
Yeah, which actually meant that when we had the local Comic Con, which was Gem City Comic Con that year, me and most of the other high-ranking members of the comic club got in for free, and I actually got to be on a panel.
Yeah, I remember you bringing that. You bring that up a lot, actually.
Yeah, which the only problem was this was at a time where I had severe fucking insomnia, so I was operating on like 2.5 hours of sleep that day.
Yeah, so like the thing is, I don't have a lot of. I mean, banning it overall is just stupid. I think is just my general thoughts.
Yeah, and my position will always be, don't ban anything or censor anything.
Shall we?
Yeah.
That decision of the Board of Education of McMinn County, located in the southeastern part of the state, generated headlines. Mouse was the anchor text for an eighth grade module on the Holocaust, and the reason for knocking it out of the curriculum was that the book includes a few cuss words, as one country school board member put it, and depicts nudity that is illustrated animal nudity.
Yeah, see, the funny thing about this, the mouse ban, is when I first saw it, I literally thought to myself, I wonder which side of the argument is advocating to ban it, because I thought maybe the social justice side of the argument was banning it because it was about Nazis, which I could totally see them doing. So this is yet another example of it's usually a crapshoot which side of the argument tries to ban things. But no, in this case, it was the old school. It was the family values set going, but it's it 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 has violence and it has nudity. Won't somebody please think of the children?
And some tech and some regular old fiction books do too.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a way, I could kind of understand. It's eighth grade, which, but it's in a module on the Holocaust, though. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the other thing. If you're willing to teach kids about the Holocaust, but you don't want them experiencing nudity, I'd call that a nonsensical standard.
dude,
If they're mature enough to learn about the genocide that the Germans did, they're probably mature enough to deal with anime, and it's not. And that's the other thing. It's not even like human or pornographic nudity. It's anthropomorphic animal nudity in the context of a story about the Holocaust.
Yeah, that is weird. And the curse words, okay, again, I could somewhat understand it.
I can't. My solution to curse words is stop making a big deal of them, because the only reason why kids make a big deal of them is because we for some reason treat them like completely different words than every other word in the English language.
Right.
But if the,
Like I said I could kind of understand it. I don't. I think I do agree. Like it is very stupid, and everyone curses, But like again, it's still a very young age, even though like eighth grade, so like it's a year away from high school, and everyone's going to be cursing and stuff. So
yeah,
um,
actually, funny story. When I was in eighth grade and we covered the Holocaust, it actually gave me nightmares because, for those that don't know, I have a physical disability, and in my nightmares that I had as a result of this, I had a nightmare that the Nazis came back, but this time in America, and instead of focusing on Jews, they were focusing on disabled people. And in the dream, I actually had to watch my family be whipped because they were hiding me.
hmm,
So yeah, if we're going to put kids through the you should feel guilty because we did Nazism once rigmarole, then let them experience it.
right.
Don't don't shelter them, you know.
So uh, Dragon Turtle, is it anthropomorphic, like furry stuff, or is it like the Rats of Nim or Disney Cinderella, where it's just a mouse walking on two legs? I think it's the latter. Also, good reference of Rats of Nim.
Yeah,
Or
it's more stylized. Like it looks sort of like Dr. Seuss almost, or like those kids books about the mice who steal cookies or something along those lines. I don't know if anyone else knows those.
there's an image up here. Yeah, yeah, like they're not humanoid looking. They're basically just mice with like maybe like regular human hands.
Yeah. Although to be fair, even if it were more anthropomorphic, I still wouldn't be in favor of banning it.
No, obviously not. I'm just saying, like, if it were that case, I could, I think,
Yeah, there would at least be a more reasonable like justification of like, okay, I could see why you thought that.
well,
But
yeah, it still doesn't really make sense for multiple reasons.
and I'd be interested to see the if this same school board bans books like George Orwell's Animal Farm because it is almost literally the exact same thing. That's the other thing about Mouse that I always find funny. Everyone acts like it's this revelatory thing, and in actuality, it's basically just Animal Farm but in comic form.
Anyway, shall we?
Yep.
Okay. Da, 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 da. The offending phraseology was bitch and goddamn. Of course, it's ridiculous to object to an account of the mass murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others because of salty language and animal nudity. Uh, but that's what happened.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I I think, ironically, in this case, objecting to the word bitch kind of proved that the school board are a bunch of bitches.
Um, I don't have anything else to say. Spiegelman told the New York Times it seemed to him the board members were asking, why can't they teach a nicer Holocaust?
That does sort of seem to be the vibe, yeah, of like we we can teach the Holocaust, but we can do it without the swearing and nudity. Derp.
You know, I don't. It's weird. That's weird to me because eighth grade, like they're 13. They just become teenagers and stuff. Like they're at that age where they are capable of understanding things.
Yeah, they're like 13, 14. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's an old thing of like I think we've said this so many times is like treat children like with like a respect of adults
Yeah,
kind of deal.
because because the thing is, kids like being treated seriously. They like being treated like adults. That's why shows like um Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Invader Zim. That's why those kind of shows resonate with people because you feel as a kid like you're getting away with something when a show or a movie or a comic treats you like an adult. And most kids don't like the saccharine sanitized things that their parents wish they liked.
Uh,
That's why there's so many memes about the, hello fellow kid syndrome because when parents try to saccharinely pander to their children are like, you don't understand me, fuck off, basically.
right. No, I thought I had something. I don't. I lost it.
Mm.
To understand this decision, which was rendered just down the road from where the Scopes monkey trial occurred in 1925, I read through the minutes of the school board meeting devoted to Mouse. It makes the story worse. Okay.
I appreciate that the Mother Jones guy doesn't appear to be editorializing so much because Mother Jones is a very, very left-leaning website, and so I was expecting there to be a lot more like partisan commentary on this, but the guy got into here's what actually happened pretty quickly. I mean, there were still a few things where I'm like, you're enjoying getting one over on your political opponents, aren't you? But it's I can live with it. I don't like it, but I can at least abide it for now.
Okay. Dragon Turtle. I'd go one step further or farther. Kids should have more interactions with adults besides disciplinary authority figures. I mean, I thought that was just a given.
Yeah, like you shouldn't you shouldn't be a drill sergeant to kids. If for no other reason, then that's just going to create rebels when they do turn 12 or 13 and they actually develop a personality.
I mean, don't
They'll
be don't, don't
yeah.
don't be like there has to be a balance.
Don't be a doormat either. Like don't let them, run amok and like
We already have too many of those assholes
yeah,
like out there.
give your kids structure, but also acknowledge that they are not um one-dimensional drones or over that they're also not simpletons that they're they may not be fully fledged individuals yet necessarily, but they will at some point get there, and it's better to let them explore that on let 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 them figure out their own boundaries as much as you can feasibly justify, because I don't know if anyone remembers what it was like to be a kid, but the only thing that because I said so ever did was prove to me how much of a vacuous appeal to authority, and and this was something I gathered even before I had a word for appeal to authority, but because I said so is just a excuse not excuse not to deal with people's actual objections in the same way as any other appeal to authority is. Treat
Um,
your kids with some degree of humanity, if not necessarily adulthood.
all right, so Dragon Turtle, I meant more that right now kids are almost entirely socialized by each other in learning what is normal and the proper way to interact with people. Each generation is the blind leading the blind.
Um, Parents should spend more time hanging out with kids or teaching them stuff.
Oh,
I
parents. Okay, sorry.
yeah,
He said parents should spend
yeah.
more time hanging out with kids or teaching them stuff, things to be more than the person who owns the house and tells them what to do.
I I don't know if I agree as much with the teaching them stuff thing. I think exposing them to stuff is more the word. Because teaching is in and of itself kind of an authoritarian thing, especially when you're dealing with really little kids. I think engage with your kids, like play with your kids, read them books, read them stories and stuff.
Yeah,
That kind of stuff I definitely agree with.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
and it's not quite it's not quite the same as parenting, but I will tell you a little bit of a side story here. One of the one of the times when I was close to my younger brother was when I started showing him classic movies because I took it upon myself as the older brother to teach him what was good in life. And in so doing, I learned more about my brother, and what his tastes were, so that I was able to start recommending him movies and stuff based on what I knew he liked. And that's the kind of things that I wish more parents did with their kids of don't try to force um don't try to force your sensibilities and stuff on your kids. Learn what your kids actually like and then guide them based on that, you know. And, be willing to share things that you like with your kids. Like when I if I ever have kids, which probably won't, even if me and my eventual significant other can find a surrogate, I don't think I would make a very good parent. But um you bet your ass that come bedtime or maybe even just throughout the day, I'm probably going to be reading them books that I liked as a kid, or and you can bet your ass that some of that is going to be comics, and same thing with movies. And I'm also going to avoid as much as possible sheltering my kids because I think we do a disservice to children by sheltering them. I think um, letting them see the world as it is as much as they can handle is better for them and their personal development.
right. Okay. So you said a few more things. I meant Dragon Turtle. I meant more teaching how to play football, beat a video game, or build something out of wood. Definitely don't force anything on them unless it's this will get you killed sort of thing.
hmm Um, I think that's probably step two. Step one is figuring out what your kid likes and or helping them to figure out what they like because
Yeah.
too many parents use you know the football or even I bet to some degree there are geek parents that do this that force their kids to be carbon copies of themselves rather than you know this is something I find cool. I wonder if you will too. Uh, rather than doing that, it's always this is what you must like, and if you don't like it, there's something wrong with you.
Right. Okay. Moving on.
Yeah.
Uh, Session open with Lee Parkinson. I think that's how you say it.
hmm
With Lee Parkinson, the director of schools for the county, noting that there is some rough, objectionable language in the book, and that 2 or 3 school board members came by his office to discuss it. He consulted with the attorney for the school system, Scott Bennett, and they decided the best fix was to redact 8 curse words and the picture of the woman that was objected to.
Okay, fuck you. Fuck everyone who objected to that shit. You hyper you hypersensitive family values twits.
Apparently, that was not sufficient.
Oh god.
Apparently, member Tony Allman. remarked, "We don't need to enable or somewhat promote this stuff. It shows people hanging. It shows them killing kids. Why does the educational system promote this kind of stuff? It is not wise or healthy." Okay, Don, before you do.
Please.
It is okay, so it is an 8th grade Holocaust module. You are teaching kids about the fucking Holocaust, a systematic genocide of various people that was based on, correct me if I'm wrong, based on a rhetoric or ideology of hate, violence, and superiority complex.
And wrong-headed understandings of history and mythology, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not done. There, I think they're under the impression that this would influence kids to do this shit to other people, which is incredibly demeaning to the intelligence of children.
Or that if we just avoid showing kids bad things, they'll never have any bad ideas of their own. Like
Um,
they'll never come up with this kind of stuff on their own. Yeah, no, we like again, this whole notion of kids aren't people in their own right for some reason is
yeah,
just
but I
stupid.
just like, you literally have a subject for teaching about genocide. Why the fuck would you get rid of a part of it?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
sorry,
go ahead.
Giant Turtle just posted this. The past is problematic. It's going to traumatize them. Get rid of it.
Yes. You see what I mean about this? It eventually becomes the same argument, just with different terminology.
Yeah, but that shit happened. Like, it's better for them to know. Granted, I learned a little later. I mean, I got inklings of it throughout my kind of later elementary years and middle school years, and we covered it mostly like in high school. But it it's kind of important that people know this shit. To be honest,
Yeah.
like my opinion, like to know that this happened, that human beings are capable of this shit, and so that we don't repeat this kind of shit again.
Yeah, and this is the other half of it. And the really difficult part of it is not only do we need to get it into people's heads that this happened, but we also need to give them the actual justification as to why it happened. We st we need to stop turning people we don't like historically into one-dimensional mustache twirling villains, because believe it or not, a large part of the people who supported the Nazi Party thought they were doing the right thing. They were wrong, of course. You know, let it never be said that I said anything other than they were obviously wrong when they thought that. But just like with what Dragon Turtle and I were saying earlier, um, and why I do take the position of, usually when you examine these kind of things, you should try your hardest to see what people say as their actual position, rather than their um their covering for some deep-seated dark thing, because everyone sees themselves as the hero of their own story, and it's worthwhile to point out that even bad people are still people. It's the Joker thing. Just because Arthur does bad things doesn't mean that he wasn't justified in his own head for doing it.
Right.
And even with the Nazis, just because they did a terrible thing, and they did, doesn't mean they didn't think of themselves as the good guys when they did it.
Yeah, still fucked up though, but still, like,
Yeah.
You at least get
And,
it.
yeah, yeah, and back to the actual article for a second. So what you're telling me then is you think your charges, your children are mature enough to deal with a freaking genocide, but woe betide them if they ever hear a curse word. And by your own logic, the logic that you just laid out of, we don't need to be promoting or um, legitimizing this. Then why are you promoting and legitimizing knowledge of a genocide? Is it because these things are actually important to know that they actually happen and to treat the past like a three-dimensional space that actually existed? Well, if that's true, then you need to treat the present like a three-dimensional space that actually exists as well. Even more so, in my opinion, probably.
All right, so Dragon Tail, 10 years later, why are the children suffering clinical depression, dropping their ice cream? Clearly, we need to shelter them more. Also, enough with everyone saying, oh, I would never do this when they clearly would.
Yeah. That I think it was Jordan Peterson that that recommended a book called I forget what the book was called, but he recommended a book that was the memoir of a concentration camp guard. And Jordan Peterson's argument was most people, if they lived in the circumstances of lived in Nazi Germany, probably would have become concentration camp guards, because just like we justify the things we do in our own heads, the concentration camp guard eventually got to the point where he could justify in his own head how, genociding the Jews was a good thing. And just once again, to be clear, by no means am I saying they were correct in their assessment. They were obviously wrong, but they still made the attempt. They were still three-dimensional people, even while doing cartoonishly evil things. Because the road to evil, as the old adage goes, is usually paved not with nefarious mustache twirling cackling, but with good intentions. It's why I always say stupidity is more dangerous than evil, because stupidity actually, I think, creates more evil than actual genuine like conspiratorial malice. Someone who genuinely believes they're doing the good thing and fighting the good fight and is wrong is far more dangerous than someone who goes, yeah, I'm evil just because I enjoy it and it's fun. And maybe that's because I'm a villainous asshole, but so be it. I can be reasoned with. The moral busybodies who have wrong-headed ideologies in their heads usually can't.
All right, is it cartoonish evil if it actually happened? Says Dragon Tail.
Yes, because it's still, over the top. Cartoonishness is usually what we mean when we say something is cartoonish is over the top or like singularly iconically one-dimensional. Like if someone actually did tie someone to railroad tracks, just because it happened in real life wouldn't make it a non-cartoonish thing for them to do. It's what the word absurdity generally means. Just because something is absurd doesn't prevent it from happening. In fact, if anything, the modern day history of the political zeitgeist suggests the world is far more absurd than the most one-dimensional cartoons we can make up sometimes.
Moving on.
Yep.
Okay. Julie Gooden, a instructional supervisor who used to teach history, patiently explained to Allman that there is nothing pretty about the Holocaust, and for me, this was a great way to depict a horrific time in history. Allman wouldn't relent. I understand that on TV and maybe at home these kids hear worse, but we are talking things that if a student went down the hallway and said this, our disciplinary policy says they can be disciplined, and rightfully so.
How about no? How about fuck off with your disciplinary policy? How about the disciplinary policy needs to be reformed? There's your problem. You think you actually are justified in being a morally puritanical prick. Instead, I would say, if you know the kids are exposed to this on TV and at home, then maybe, you know, and civilization is still the world is still turning. The civilization hasn't collapsed yet. Maybe you could cut the kids a little bit of slack because kids are still people. They might not be fully, realized people yet, but that's part of your job. And part of your job might be, in this case, to cool your fucking jets and calm the fuck down. Because ironically, you're acting more childish than your own students would in this case. Because I don't like it because it's icky is far more childish than, yeah, I don't know, I guess that's cool, who cares? Which is generally the attitude of your average, 8th grader, is just kind of, that's cool, who cares?
Okay, Dragon Turtle. That's where we have the clown world meme in a new internet world. The clown to make a clown of oneself, as in the politician, the clown himself.
Yeah.
Okay, and we are teaching this and going against policy. Malasan Knight, another instructional supervisor, took a stab at it. People did hang from trees, people did commit suicide, and people were killed. Over 6 million murdered. Spiegelman is trying to portray that the best he can with the language that he chooses that would relate to that time. Is the language objectionable? Sure. I think that is how he used that language.
Okay. Follow through on the logic, please.
No, that's Malasan, not.
No, I know, but even she did it a little bit. You admit that people did hang from trees. You admit that people were genocided, but you still, for some reason, can't admit to yourself or your students, apparently, on some level, that swear words are just words. And on the scale of objectionableness, I would say actual actions of genocide are more objectionable than some words that some people don't like for some reasons. In the same way as you need to get over it because this actually happened makes sense. You could apply that same standard to swear words and just be like, yeah, people do swear. And what's more, our own students probably swear in their free time. Because I can tell you that my youngest brother is 15 and he is a gamer. So you can imagine the ahem, to borrow a phrase from the gamer words that I catch him saying when he's in the middle of the zone. But I don't fault him for it because I understand that A, he's a teenager, and B, being a gamer myself at one point, I know what it's like to use gamer words. The correct answer is maybe swear words aren't in this special sacrosanct category. Maybe if people were more willing to just use the word fuck a little bit more and not panic about it, it would become like every other goddamn word in the English language. Like, for example, we don't censor the word intercourse. We don't censor the word or the phrase sleep together. We don't censor screw um or any of the other synonyms for fuck. And in fact, in sex ed, we actually have to use some of those words. But you use the word fuck, and all of a sudden, everybody loses their fucking mind. And the same is true of every other swear word. You know, you don't object to the word vagina, but somebody uses the word cunt, and all of a sudden, it's everyone loses their fucking mind. I'm sounding a lot like Heath Ledger's Joker, but it's because in cases like this, there is a anarchistic streak in me that starts to go, this entire system makes no sense, and I demand I'm going to destroy it until you build one that actually does make sense. Lord.
Right. Okay. Dragon Turtle. This happened recently. Someone was having their house shelled in Ukraine, but the important thing was her using homophobic language against Putin on Twitter. We live in a society, Authenticator.
Yes, yes, it is. It very much is. We're living in a society. Yes, I know. I'm slowly metamorphosizing into the Joker just because people refuse to make sense.
Right. Moving on.
Yeah.
Alright. Allman went on to say that Spiegelman had once done work for Playboy. You can look at his history, and we're letting him do graphics and books for students in elementary school. That is such a fucking straw man. It has nothing. It's not at all related.
Yeah.
To the
False equivalency, anyone?
My God, that is. How old is
Yeah.
this guy? I am very curious.
Yeah, read that again because I actually didn't catch it. I was closing out the chat when you were speaking.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Allman went on to say that Spiegelman had once done artwork for Playboy. You can look at his history, and we're letting him do graphics and books for students in elementary school.
So, if somebody does a different kind of art for a different kind of audience in their free time, they shouldn't be allowed to write a different kind of art for a different kind of audience.
Right. Let me read what's going on here. The next thing.
Yeah.
The book, though, was being taught in the 8th grade. He continued, if I had a child in the 8th grade, this ain't happening. If I had to move him out and homeschool him to put him somewhere else, this is not happening.
Oh my God, you childish prick.
My,
I hope to God that if you do have children, they're more mature than you.
probably not.
How thin-skinned could you conceivably be? Do you not remember what it was like to be 13? Not only didn't you mind edgy shit when you were 13, but you actually favored it because it made you feel mature and like you could handle shit. As opposed to the, Teletubbies and Barney and whatever else the fuck your parents wanted you to watch. But but this attitude is exactly the problem. The people who will just fold when when they're told you shouldn't do that, they actually listen, and I don't understand why. Like, I listen to people who bother making sense, but because I said so is not an argument. And if you can't justify why you find something objectionable, then you don't get to project your finding it objectionable onto other people's choices. You are free to your own thoughts and your own words, but you do not have any right whatsoever to have that be catered to, and you do not have the right to avoid arguing with people. Frick. Moving on.
Right. All right. We good one. Tried again. Oh no, good. Try it again. We have to teach our kids. Are these words okay? No, not at all. Are we going to be teaching these words outside of this book as vocabulary words? No. You know me better than that, Tony Allman. It wasn't working. He shot back. If a student sitting in the cafeteria decides to read this out loud and complete the sentence, what are you going to do? He and other members appear obsessed with the notion that students would be reciting portions of the book just so they could say bitch and goddamn. Wow, that is like,
Okay, I actually disagree with the woman who's actually making some kind of sense here in this case, because the way you declaw a bad word is by not giving a fuck about it. So yeah, why not use those words as vocabulary words? Maybe if more people did that, we wouldn't live in a world where certain words could just stop everyone's reasoning faculties dead. And I hate to break it to you guys, but just because you don't want these kids to be saying these words ain't gonna stop them from saying these words. In fact, the more outrageous and edgy you make them, the more they're gonna want to use them. Because puberty is when you individuate as a human. And one of the ways we individuate as humans is by separating ourselves from the um, presuppositions of our elders. That's how you become an individual. You make choices separate from the choices that your betters want you to make. And sometimes that has negative consequences, but it's part of what it means to become a fully fledged human being. The willingness to look at someone telling you to do something and say no, unless you can explain to me why I should care. God damn it. Moving on.
yeah. Giant Turtle. Authenticator is going to lose it one day and try to ritually send Portland out through the outer gates. You want to not make sense? Fine, have fun. You'd think that these people would understand Voldemort words since they treat Harry Potter like a tradcon does the Bible.
Well, no, these are the tradcons. In this case, it's the tradcons that tried to ban Mouse. In in this, again, this is me attempting to be even-handed with my principles. Um, when this happened, a lot of the conservative commentators on YouTube, like Lotus Eaters and stuff, were defending um the mouse ban because they were fighting against subverting our teaching our children degeneracy and derp. But no, my standard is no ban, no censor, and I will stand by that. I will stand by that position. I don't care if you're Helen Lovejoy banning things for family values, and I don't care if you're Karen banning things for social justice. The correct answer is no ban, no censor, fuck you. And oh.
Moving on.
but but yes, I have considerably thought about maybe sending these guys to a Lovecraftian dimension. Um, and yes, I also have, and I'm not sure if uh Dragon Turtle knows about Castlevania, but I'm sure Brainstormer is familiar with my saying. Maybe Dracula from Castlevania did nothing wrong. Maybe I should summon the Night Horde. And sometimes, yeah, it gets to that level. Uh, moving on.
Uh, Stephen Brady, another instructional supervisor, explained to the board that the mouse is the anchor text for this English language arts module on the Holocaust. The class also includes interviews with Holocaust survivors, excerpts from other books, and assorted news stories. That mouse was chosen in part because of its format. Students in this class create graphic novel panels as part of their study. The other three modules for the year cover Latin America, food, and the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. Brady remarked, "We are not promoting the use of these words. If anything, we are promoting that these words are inappropriate and it's best that we not use them." He told the board that the mouse could not be replaced without redoing this whole module. Okay,
Okay, yeah, that
besides inappropriate, besides like the stupid thing they just said, yeah, I could totally understand why they would feel it necessary to keep it because to be honest, I have like the honestly like the closest people I was close like the people I was closest to in school were kind of my teachers, and
yeah.
they really worked their asses off.
Yeah, I had a lot of really good teachers in my school too, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
and like
but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
redoing a module which is effectively a plan for about maybe a couple months at
Yeah,
most.
like a semester or so.
Yeah, that dude. Can you imagine the summers that they've wasted trying to create those, like work on those for just one semester?
Yeah. And here's door number two about that. Okay, but the thing of it is, what if some kids are the kind of kids who won't understand it unless it's put in terms they can understand? Like, say, a comic that they might read in their free time. What if there are some kids who are gonna look at the historical documentaries and the excerpts from adult books and go, "This is boring. I don't understand this, and I don't understand why I should."
I don't.
Whereas you give a 13-year-old a cool edgy comic that makes the point, and all of a sudden it might click. That's the other thing. The whole reason Mouse is here probably is because some incredibly, smart and actually with it teacher at one point went, kids, kids like comics in general, so if I show them the same thing, the same material, but in a cool, edgy comic form that's actually going to engage them, it might actually make it more real to them and make it so they can understand it better in terms that they'll actually get and care about.
Moving on.
Yeah. But in general, yeah, I agree with this guy because he's saying like we can use comics as a teaching tool and teach kids that comics are a valid form of literature and expression in and of themselves. So at the moment, the person I'm siding with is this guy. Moving on.
Yeah. All right. School board member Jonathan Pierce didn't buy that. You can take that module and rewrite it and make it do the same thing. The wording in this book is in direct conflict with some of our policies. If I said on the school bus that I was going to kill you, we would be bringing disciplinary action against that child.
See, this this is the kind of, well, the the law says I should do this and therefore I will uncritically do what I'm told. It's it's an extension of that kind of mentality. maybe if your disciplinary policies say that, maybe instead of changing how you're evaluating Mouse, which is a Pulitzer Prize winning comic, maybe you should perhaps reevaluate your disciplinary standards. Maybe kids sometimes joke about edgy things, especially teenagers, especially teenagers who are just learning how to individuate themselves. Because I can tell you that some of my best friends and I insult each other to our faces all the live long day. Um, um,
Yeah.
and it just brings us together. Maybe instead of insisting that the disciplinary policies should change the curriculum, maybe you should adjust the disciplinary policies to what the curriculum allows. Dipshit. But no, the sacred disciplinary policies must be perfectly justified, no matter how nonsensical and puritanical they are. Derp. Uh, it's like the people who obsess over the COVID restrictions. Like, but the COVID restrictions say, yeah, but if the restrictions make no sense, why should we follow them? Moving on.
Right. All right. Dragon Turtle. They have literally went after kids for finger guns and stick sword fights. If the kids think about something bad, people freak out. Oh my god, this is why I fucking hate the American education system. One of the many reasons, actually.
Yeah, there is a very long list of
And,
reasons to hate the American educational system. But yes, you know, we can't let children do aggressive things because then they might think that aggressive things are somehow okay or valid, even though they are, but that's beside the point. We have to treat children like sheltered bubble children who have no edgy thoughts, and that totally will prevent them from ever having edgy thoughts.
okay. Another member, Rob Shamblin, interjected. My bigger concern is that this is probably the tip of the iceberg of what is out there. You're suggesting that the entire curriculum needed more vetting to catch mouse-like problems. Oh my god, this board should not be in any form of power.
Yeah, I'm appalled that you guys teach children because honestly, and I'm not tooting my own horn here too much, but I was more mature at the age of 5 than you fuckers appear to be in your fucking 30s. And I'm reasonably certain that's not me being the exception to the rule because most people that I knew in school, or at least the ones I interacted with, were like, did, did you guys just not go through puberty yourselves? Is that what this is? Did you just not individuate from your own parents, or were you the kind of Randall from Recess assholes who, when authority figures told you to do something, you uncritically did it? Were you guys the delightful children from down the lane types? You know, there's a reason why in kid shows everybody hates those guys, right? because because nobody should be expected to be that cucking to authority.
Moving on.
Moving on.
It's easy to imagine the frustration of the educators up against this. Knight tried again to reason with the board, pointing out that the numerous books taught in the system contain foul language, including Briss Terabithia, The Whipping Boy, and To Kill a Mockingbird. I
Good point. I would have perhaps brought up Animal Farm because that is probably one of the closest analogies to Mouse. It's literally Animal Farm in comic form, pretty much, with more focus on Nazis and less on communism, obviously. But it's the same kind of analogy, and yet George Orwell got away with it half a century ago, and we can't get away with it now because it's one of those uncouth comic things. They're Frederick Wortham like assholes.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Okay. That was no sale. Board member Mike Cochran piped up. I went to school here 13 years. I never had a book with a naked picture in it. Never had one with foul language. So this idea that we have to have this kind of material in this class in order to teach history, I don't buy it. Oh, fuck you.
Maybe if you had been exposed to some edgy things as a child, you wouldn't be such a milquetoast, white bread tradcon prick right now. Maybe if you were allowed to actually individuate when you were a teenager, you would understand why it's okay to let kids be kids and let boys be boys and so on. But instead, you actually appear to be the kind of stooge who does sell out his friends for doing edgy things just because the powers that be tell you to. I cannot understand for the life of me why anyone would, when faced with the phrase "because I said so," actually do the thing they're being told to do. My answer to that has always been, ever since I was a little kid, explain to me why. And not to toot my own horn here, but as far as I know, that was the correct answer. No, I'm not going to. No, I'm not going to do what you say just because you say it. I'm going to interrogate why you're asking me to do so.
Okay. Dragon Turtle. Also, boy, not boy. In fact, cannot be boys. They need to behave like girls. Sit still, be polite. No roughhousing. Don't get dirty, etc.
But even little girls are more edgy than this prick. Because I wager Allison Team and Hannah Wallen and Karen Strawn were once little girls, and they were the kind of little girls who would like something like Allison actually was a comic book artist for a while there, at least until she was basically blanket banned from the comic book industry because some feminist in the Mary Sue slandered her. But whatever. So what about the cool edgy girls who would be in favor of this stuff too?
Anyway.
What about the Karen Murphys of the world? Is what I'm saying. Sorry, go ahead. I had to finish it with a Dresden reference because I got Dragon Turtle into Dresden.
He grounds that the book obliquely refers to Spiegelman's father losing his virginity and explicitly depicts the suicide of Spiegelman's mother. A lot of the cussing had to do with the son cussing out the father, he complained. So I don't really know how that teaches our kids any kind of ethical stuff. We don't need this stuff to teach kids history. We don't need all the nakedness and all the other stuff. Oh, fuck you. Clearly, you're not reading it. Not really.
How could a 30 to 40-year-old man be this much of a childish dickhead? Like, I I you know I've always been on the nerd side of these kind of arguments, and I've never been in favor of kids actually being beat up. But honestly, I think this guy should have been beat up more when he was a kid, until he grew something resembling a reasonably thick skin. Because I was the crippled kid, and nobody ever laid a finger on me, and I still grew up more sensible than this asshole.
Moving on.
And also is are the kids' like ability to engage with the material ever going to come up with this, or their ability to enjoy being taught things ever going to come up with this? Because again, one of the reasons why I would advocate for teaching something like Maus in relation to the Holocaust is because kids will enjoy it more and therefore will become more engaged with the material. Because this is the other thing. This is one of the other problems with the American educational system is we don't actually care if kids actually internalize the material. We only care if they can recite it back in the appropriate like tempo. And I think the educational system would be better off if we actually taught kids in a way that they would actually enjoy rather than making their education a living hell. Because all your way of teaching them is going to do is going to put the information in their head for just long enough for them to pass the test, and then they're immediately going to forget it as soon as the test is over. But if you teach them in a way they actually care about, it will stick with them longer. Moving on.
Right. Okay. To make his point, Cochrane raised the issue of a poem that he claimed was being taught in 7th grade, and he insisted on reading it. Okay. I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. Heavenly blisses of his kisses fill me with ecstasy. He's sweet just like chocolate candy, / just like honey from the bee. Oh, I'm just wild about Harry, and he's just wild about me. Okay?
It, again,
Uh, sorry.
have you? Huh?
Nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. Was anyone at at this school board ever actually a child, or were they just grown in a lab to be adults?
Alright, Giant Turtle Authenticator is a book dealer and people hooked on novel series.
I do my best. I play the role that I've always been meant to play, the proverbial Leland Gaunt or Randall Flagg. I show people what I have to sell and I let them make their own choices. Which if you haven't read either um the Randall Flagg books by Stephen King, or at the very least Needful Things, which features Leland Gaunt as the main character, there's another series for you to get addicted to. Also, Dr. Sleep, which will introduce you to the glorious and beautiful Rose the Hat. She's awesome. Stephen King is very good at villains in a way that most people aren't anymore for some reason. Moving on.
Right. He griped that students were asked to define ecstasy and that they were being exposed to vulgarity. He went on, it looks like the entire curriculum is developed to normalize sexuality, normalize nudity, and normalize vulgar language. If I was trying to indoctrinate somebody's kids, this is how I would do it. Oh my fucking god.
So instead, we'll just indoctrinate them into a world that's basically fucking Westview from WandaVision, Stepford from the Stepford Wives, and fucking Pleasantville. And that totally won't repress them or scar them for life or anything. And that totally won't turn them into even more edgy teenagers because they'll have to recalibrate for their being repressed.
Alright, so moving on to the next thing, because you might get kicked out of this, Stone. I don't know if the educators present kept straight faces from the author himself, like the writer of this article. Conklin was quoting not a poem, but the lyrics of the song "I'm Just Wild About Harry," which was written by E.B. Blake in 1921. Judy Garland had a hit with the tune in 1939, and in 1948, President Harry S. Truman adopted the number as his campaign theme song. Yet for Conklin, this 100-year-old song was too racy for a middle schooler. It was obvious how he would be voting.
Oh, he was actually advocating that we shouldn't sing that either. I thought he was advocating that as the alternative to things like Mouse. Jesus Christ, how prudish could you possibly be?
Like it's also really coming across that he is such an incompetent dumbass that he probably shouldn't be on a board of education.
Like again, you are literally dumber than the children you are presuming to be able to educate. I am reasonably sure of that. You show this to your average high schooler or your average middle schooler, and they could probably explain to you in fairly simplistic terms, probably, but they could explain to you why you're being a childish moron.
Hmm.
Like they would accuse you of being a fucking baby because you're acting like a child, even though you're 30 or 40 or whatever.
Now, if he's on the board, that he'd have to be a lot older, I'd assume. Actually,
Yeah, like late 30s to like mid 50s, somewhere in there.
yeah, like he would have to get on like a board of education. I assume one has to be an educator first, so he'd have to be a teacher for some time, which is usually takes up his 20s to 30s.
Well, no, you could be the principal or you could be like a superintendent or something. Um, I know my principal that eventually became superintendent was like 55 or something, I want to say.
Either way, it's the dude. Yeah, like 40s or 50s at most.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a child. You have spent 40 or 50 years on this earth and you have not outgrown the playground mentality of, ew, that's icky, I don't want to deal with that. And people wonder why I say Harry Dresden was right about people's ability to avoid things they don't want to deal with.
Right.
Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. So after this, we are going to have to skip the article. Skip the article we had planned. Move on to the next one. Then in society.
Mm-hmm.
We're after we're done with this article because we're nearly done with it. I do think we're going to have to skip the article we had planned.
We can just move the witch burning book burning thing to next week.
Anyway, okay, so the educators pushed on mightily. Knight explained further how this module is purposely based on a graphic novel to highlight different types of writing and style. Brady pointed out it's the only Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel. It's very highly recommended. You know that because the modules build on each other, striking the Holocaust module, which would be necessary with the removal of its anchor text, would leave the students less prepared for the next one. Pierce responded, "Don't tell me that there's not another book out there." Oh, fuck you.
Again, like that, the person who's advocating for it on like English lit terms is my favorite person in this exchange right now, because like, yeah, we're gonna teach kids that comics can be literature, and it's gonna work perfectly well with the Holocaust module we're already teaching them. So it'll be cross-disciplinary in a way that actually makes sense. Yeah, good for you. I forget his name, for being the adult in the room. But incidentally, no matter what comic people chose to choose to substitute Mouse with, if you wanted to swap Mouse out for something that was like Mouse, you're going to have issues with. If we teach Sandman, you're going to bitch about people being indoctrinated into the occult or paganism. If we teach Watchmen, you're going to bitch about them being inculcated into communism and edginess and so on and so forth again. If we teach Grant Morrison's Animal Man, we're gonna have to teach kids about metaphysics. How if we swapped it out for Captain freaking America, you'd have an issue with it because the things that they got away with in the 30s and 40s would make you blush still probably.
Actually, you know what? Like, I would, if I was a teacher, which would kind of be my kind of go-to job if I was, if the writing thing doesn't really work out. I I would. Like, granted, most of Grant Morrison's stuff would probably be quote unquote not viable.
Yeah, anything by like Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, or Alan Moore is gonna be too much for this fucker.
Right.
But again, like I said, even stuff from the Golden Age would probably be too much for this guy.
Dumbasses.
Yeah.
And yet they're educators, which is fucking horrifying.
Yep. And now we understand why this whole system is a problem. Because regardless of whether it's the evangelical tradcon family values set or the Frankfurt School deconstructionist social justice set, we can't let people be people, full-rounded people with their own opinions and views, because then they might do bad things.
Oh yeah. Moving on. The board discussed with Bennett, the lawyer, the possibility of redacting more than the 8 words cited as offensive in a picture or two. Bennett said that there would be copyright issues doing that. In any event, Shamblin suggested this wouldn't do. It's more offensive than that. He added this kicker. I have not seen the book and read the whole book. I read the reviews. The only item on the meeting's agenda was what to do about Mouse, and this board member had not bothered to glance at it. Okay, see, that bothers me more than anything else said.
Yep. I know I haven't actually read this book, but I'm still convinced that it's corrupting the youth or something.
It's my similar problem that I fucking have with the Oscars when it comes to certain awards.
I don't like movies, but I still feel like I should actually get a say as to which movies are considered good, even if I haven't watched them.
Well, it's not the animation one I was kind of referencing to. It's like most of the time the guys who pick that shit aren't the ones that watch them. They're fucking.
I would never lower myself to watching a kids movie, but I suppose if it's Pixar, it's fine.
That fucking shit pisses me off. Okay, because there are some anime movies that are better than fucking live action. I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah, show those guys Spirited Away and then see how they feel about animation, I wonder.
Okay.
I love that movie.
Right. Okay,
Spirited Away is awesome.
So, sorry, Dragon Troll, I missed a few things. Okay, so the Bible is too edgy for these guys. And then you missed an O and 2. The New Testament is. The Constitution probably is. Honestly, these people think that if a kid sees someone not smiling, it will corrupt or traumatize them.
Yeah. And the sick and sad thing is because these guys are the family values evangelical types, they probably are also Bible thumpers and the sorts of people that are like constitutional literalists. Like, we can never ever alter the Constitution because that's the other dark telltale secret. Most of these family values Bible thumping types haven't even read the Bible. They just listen to what their minister tells them it's about.
Yeah. Okay, so before I move on, Dragon Turtle animation that must be for kids, in quotations. I'd argue animation is better than live action. Period. Dude, my favorite movies, trilogy of movies, kind of boils down to from the same. It's actually really DreamWorks movies I like watching a lot. I don't know why. I honestly think DreamWorks is better than Pixar at this point. Personally.
I think it depends.
Yeah. case by case scenario. Obviously, I'm
Yeah.
just
When DreamWorks is good, like for example Megamind,
or
you know,
How to Train Your
yeah,
Dragon, which is kind of my
yeah,
go, or
yeah,
Rise of the Guardians.
yeah. That. Yeah, when DreamWorks is having a good day, they can be on par with anything Pixar can throw out. But when Pixar is having a good day, they still, I think, probably take it.
Fair. I'm just again personally, I like DreamWorks more because I think I've been exposed to it more than Pixar.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, I don't know. It's recently the art style of Pixar movies just it lacked something to me.
Yeah, they seem to be trying to make things more and more photorealistic, and it doesn't. It usually ends up actually kind of counter counterbalancing because the actual animation style is so stylized, so it ends up being kind of uncanny.
I was actually kind of making the argument in this weird side tangent, and we're
Mhm.
gonna move back to the article real quick. But the problem I have is kind of the uniformity between films with a lot of Pixar movies,
Mm,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
They all feel very same, like kind of like how Marvel films were for me for a while.
I mean, I would probably still make the argument like I kind of do with Marvel movies of like they're only the same if you ignore all the differences, but
No,
I understand what you're saying.
like the more kind of mundane movies, I suppose, from Pixar.
Yeah.
You know,
They're all going to be extremely heavily focused on themes. They're all going to try and be emotionally manipulative. They're all going to have cute characters that end up having really serious situations and things happen to them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I guess the art style too, and like kind of the more recent ones, I guess.
Hmm.
Well,
Like like if you compare Inside Out to Soul, it's very similar. Yeah.
yeah.
Although
Anyway,
although I will say I really like Inside Out and Soul, and we don't even need to talk about Coco because good goddamn that movie is awesome.
I
But
I'll be honest, I haven't seen a Pixar movie in years.
okay, well
Well, it's
there
just
are
nothing
there
changed.
are some that there are definitely some that you should watch.
Well,
There are some you can skip, but
dude,
some you should watch.
it's just none of them have really interested me. Like I've seen the trailers for them and stuff. They haven't really
Mm.
grabbed my attention. I
I
can't.
think yeah, I think at the very least Coco you should watch because it probably
Look. I did see it. It's
mm,
okay. I'm not. It's
it didn't pass your emotional engagement test.
no, no. It didn't grab me, man. It didn't really interest me.
That surprises me because if any franchise was able to grab pass your emotional engagement test, I would think it would be Pixar because that's one of the things I find annoying about Pixar, especially modern Pixar, is they try to work in an emotionally manipulative scene in every movie they do.
Okay, that's the problem for me though, is that they try to
Yeah.
have it in there where it doesn't come off naturally.
Yeah, it feels forced. Like you will cry, damn it, you will cry, or we will make you.
Full disclosure, I didn't cry during the opening of Up, not once. Not
Yeah,
ever.
no, I don't. I
Well,
I like the rest of Up better than I like the opening, actually.
you are a cold, emotionless bastard. So,
Yeah, I,
and
I I'm not good at the emotions. I looked at the offer between the feel good emotions, yay fairy queen, and I went. Actually, you know what? I want the savage, logical fairy queen.
right, right.
So, so like maybe I'm not the best and best
Okay,
uh
we're okay. We're off
yeah.
topic. We gotta finish this.
Yeah.
Uh, Moments later, the board voted. All 10 members chose to boot Mouse. Not one vote for teaching reality. This is a loss for the students and the teachers. They will miss out on a literary breakthrough and a crucial slice of history. The 2020 poll found that 63% of adults under the age of 40 did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust.
You're okay. Hang reality for a second. My issue is they're going to miss out on a really good they're going to miss out on a really good piece of art, and it's going to ruin their ability to engage with history.
Yeah.
Because again, there probably are quite a lot of kids who, when faced with learning about the Holocaust, probably won't get it unless somebody phrases it in terms that they would understand, like, say, a comic, a really, really fucking good comic.
I will say, though, full disclosure, I didn't know. I actually thought it was more than 6 million, at least 10 million.
More people died in the Holocaust, but only 6 million of them were, or around 6 million of them were Jews.
Huh.
The thing they usually don't tell you is the Holocaust didn't just affect Jews. It also affected gypsies, homosexuals. It also affected the few black people that were in Germany at the time, because the whole thing about the Holocaust is they wanted to get rid of the Untermensch, the underman, so as to create the Aryan Superman of H.P. Blavatsky's Atlantean mythology. That's the funny little thing they don't tell you. Yes, 6 million Jews did die, but actually more people died in the Holocaust than just the 6 million Jews. And that's not even counting all the military dead that actually fought in World War II that kind of also can be put at the feet of the Nazis.
Yeah. All right. I don't really have anything else to say. Is Don, do you?
No.
Okay.
Moving on.
What's worse for the kids is that their intellectual development is being held hostage by board members who are stuck in another era, who find vulgarity in an old pop song, and who cannot be bothered to do their own homework. Uh, the best hope is that this foolishness from the board will prompt students to read Mouse on their own. The book sold out on Amazon as a result of this sad kerfuffle, and more important, take a hard look at these censorious overseers and their closed-mindedness.
Yeah,
That'll
that's I I agree totally.
yeah.
And I'm glad that this caused a Streisand effect, which always tends to happen when you ban things. Almost like
Um,
you should just cool it and not ban things.
uh, that will provide a good education for the teenagers of McMinn County. Okay. I don't really have anything else to say about it, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're just waiting for the next article to load.
DT, probably because we've been talking about Pixar for the last 20 minutes.
Right, Underman. Why does this just make me think of Nazis fighting the Underminer from The Incredibles? See, Incredibles I like from Pixar.
Mm-hmm.
For multiple reasons, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, like other Pixar movies, hell, I'm not even like the biggest fan of Toy Story.
Yeah, no, I don't like Toy Story either. I don't really understand why that franchise caught on with so many people.
I think it's weird. I'm more of a fan of like the unconventional movies, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
more so. Like, I guess it's more for Disney than Pixar. Like I like Tangled. Uh, Obviously, like one of my favorite Disney movies is The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's just I don't know. Yeah, most Pixar movies don't really interest me,
Mm-hmm.
just because again, like that emotional manipulation thing. It's more forcing the emotions out instead of having it come out naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I cannot be my emotional gauge doesn't work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And I don't like them because my thinking is if the only thing your movie has going for it is emotion, then you failed.
I mean, yeah, that's also fair. That's completely
It,
fair.
it, in the same way as I often don't like M. Night Shyamalan movies because the only thing he has going for them is the twist, usually.
Now, to be fair, that his first movies that had the twist worked.
See, I'm weird when it comes to M. Night Shyamalan. The movies I like of his are his superhero trilogy. I don't even really like Sixth Sense because it's another example of if the only thing your movie has going for it is one plot element, i.e. the twist, then you failed. You haven't actually created a good movie. You've created a good twist and then filled in the gaps around it.
Uh,
Whereas with his superhero trilogy, I think those work whether you know the twist or not, regardless, and that makes them good.
okay. Yeah, it's loaded now. Okay.
Mhm.
So this is one Dawn wanted to cover. Wonder why.
Yeah.
This is from belloflostsouls.net. Uh, Net, Netflix is The Sandman. Neil Gaiman gives fans an idea of what to expect. Written by Mars Garnett, or Garrett, Mars Garrett. It's published February 17th.
I am so afraid that Netflix is going to ruin my favorite comic, and it's going to do so with the permission of its creator, which is going to make it even more infuriating.
Um, Give me 1 second. Yeah, we've covered the Sandman many times on this channel. Uh,
Because just like I dragged Dragon Turtle to Dresden Files kicking and screaming, I eventually dragged Brainstormer to Sandman kicking and screaming. He hasn't finished it yet, though.
I mean, it wasn't exactly kicking and screaming. I just could not find them. Slash, like I'd have to go to like a different bookstore now. I don't think I can get them at my comic shop.
Mm.
Because the Barnes and Noble I went to get them shut down.
Aw.
Yeah, been like that for a couple months actually. Plus,
I'm I'm gonna have to keep that in mind for your birthday. I might just get you the omnibuses.
I gotta find a place to put all my fucking comics though. 'Cause I'm running out of room in my file cabinet.
Okay, so a bookshelf might be a better gift then.
Or I can just get another file cabinet.
Mm.
Anyway, yeah. Netflix's The Sandman is one of the most anticipated shows of the year. Eh,
I It should be in a sane universe where
no, to a more the masses, I suppose. The normies, you know.
see, but I don't even think that's true because I unsurprisingly when the trailer came out, I watched a lot of people's trailer reactions and the normie ones that hadn't really heard of Sandman before um didn't really know what to make of it, and the ones that did were usually a lot like me, in that they were like, why is Dream just a regular goth dude?
Um,
And so on and so forth.
right.
So yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not. I guess I'm sort of the same. I'm kind of in the middle though because I'm not. I'm still working my way through it, and I'm also still kind of a novice towards it. So I'm not. I also looked at this thing, like the trailer, I suppose, from the perspective of a guy who's done directing and stuff and things like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, Dragon Turtle, I was not kicking and screaming. That is Chrono.
Yeah, he's still taking his sweet ass time getting to Dresden Files. And he committed the ultimate heresy of watching the terrible TV show version first.
Um, Netflix's The Sandman is fuck. Author Neil Gaiman shares details plus a new on-set photo. The Sandman combines modern myth and dark fantasy. It weaves contemporary fiction, historical drama, and legend into an amazing story about the Dream King as he fixes the cosmic errors he's made over his long lifetime.
Well, the errors were mostly the result of him being bound for 70 years in the comic, but sensibly a century or so in the show. That's the one change that I'm like, that actually makes more sense.
Right,
Because 70 years was always a weird cutoff in the comic.
right.
But yeah.
Starts with Roger Burgess. We've already reacted to this. I don't remember which thing it was. Which podcast?
130, I think,
Okay.
was the Sandman trailer reaction one.
I'm sure there's some. I actually kind of want to see if anyone made any fan trailers that are better.
It wouldn't be hard.
No, really wouldn't. Okay. Show is going to be unlike the other fantasy series coming out this year. It is far from traditional. In the upcoming issue of Empire, Gaiman opened up about bringing his groundbreaking comic to the screen. Other fantasy series.
See, but that's the thing. That's what made Sandman better than Alan Moore, or most of what Alan Moore did. Alan Moore was all about the subversion. He just happened to be really good at it, and so it didn't matter much. But Neil Gaiman, when he made Sandman, made it as a love letter to comics. He didn't retcon things to be edgy and subversive. He combined the existing mythologies of the various Sandman for DC, because there's like 4 of them, and built a sprawling mythology not out of his own creations usually, but out of existing mythology and tying them together, tying history and mythology and the blurry spaces in between together. And yet, apparently, when Netflix came to him and said, "We want to adapt this, but we want to remove all the comic references," Neil Gaiman was okay with it, which is why I'm kind of very pissed off with Neil Gaiman at the moment, because he didn't fight for the things that actually make Sandman good, probably because he didn't actually realize what he did right, and that makes me annoyed.
Right. Um, what other fantasy series are they talking about?
Sweet Tooth. Netflix adapted Sweet Tooth.
I haven't seen that. I don't
And
really care to see it, honestly.
now I tried to watch it. It wasn't very good. I
Yeah.
mean, the makeup effects were really good. Like the actual aesthetic of the main character was cool, but it the actual plot didn't grab me.
Yeah. Look, yeah, I'm starting to get tired. Uh,
Mm.
you watch episode 1 and think, oh, I get this. It's like Downton Abbey, but with magic. Then you'll be wondering, what the hell is this by episode 2 when you're meeting Gregory, the gargoyle, and dreaming. Episode 5 is about as dark and traumatic as anything is ever going to get. Then you got episode 6, which is probably the most feel good of all the episodes.
See, this doesn't bother me, this part, because it seems like he's just describing the issues because I could see somebody who hasn't read Sandman reading Preludes and Nocturnes and thinking it was Downton Abbey-esque, and I could see somebody reading Imperfect Hosts and thinking this is cool now. Now Cain and Abel are here with Gregory and Goldie, which the I I'm gonna keep my fanboying to a minimum about the original source material, and I think episode 5 is going to be the episode that touches on 24-hour diner and what's the other one that has the fighting dream in it?
I God, I don't remember, dude. It's been so long since I read them.
Yeah, but there's a two-issue story within the first volume of Sandman where Dream fights Dr. Destiny for the control of his Dreamstone, and it involves Dr. Destiny taking over the dreams of the world within a 20 open all night diner, and seriously fucked up shit.
It's actually a really great fan film, kind of dedicated to that whole issue, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. It's called 24-hour diner, and it adapts the first part. It adapts the first issue of the 2-issue story there.
Yeah,
I imagine the episode 6 he's referring to is probably Sound of Her Wings because if they're adapting stuff from the first volume, they're probably the most feel good issue within Preludes and Nocturnes is definitely Sound of Her Wings.
Alright. If you didn't like an episode of Game of Thrones, you probably won't like any other episode of Game of Thrones. The Sandman, it's all about surprising you. It's all about reinventing itself. It's all about taking you on a journey you've not been on before.
See, this is where he loses me because if I were adapting Sandman, I would say for the people who haven't read Sandman, it will be surprising, but for the people who have read it, it won't be because they liked. This is the thing, Neil. We liked the story the journey we were already on, and we were happy to do so again, with the exception of the ending, which won't be relevant for a few seasons yet. So I'm not gonna whine about that too much. Assuming this even gets to season 2, which at this point I don't think it will, because I think it'll probably end up somewhere in the same vicinity as Amazon's Lord of the Rings, because you've taken out all the good Sandman stuff from the Sandman, and it bothers me, both as a fan of the comic and as a magical practitioner, because I don't know if you know this. Well, of course you wouldn't know this, but Neil, your story was so good. The story of the original run of the Sandman was so good that I got into the study of magical evocation just so I could someday summon the real world equivalent of Dream of the Endless and thank him because your comic, Neil, was so good that it actually saved me from a crippling depression after I got suspended from college because of my anxiety issues. But you, Neil, apparently don't consider yourself grateful to have been inspired by the Lord of Dreams. You don't see how he obviously helped you along back when you were young and hungry and had everything to prove. You genuinely do think you know everything about your own material. And as a result, you have now removed probably like 40% of what made the original, at least Preludes and Nocturnes, good. And you've turned the Dream King from this living embodiment of night and darkness itself into a pasty goth kid who I'm gonna have to sit and watch butcher the material that saved my miserable soul from a depression. That is why I'm mad at you, Neil, because you always seem to have this power of getting inspired by these mythological entities. In the case of the Sandman, it was Dream. In the case of American gods, it was Odin, and so on and so forth. But you don't consider yourself lucky to have that inspiration. You just consider yourself a greater person because you got it. And then when the inspiration dries up, you don't become humbled and reassess. You just assume that you know better than everyone. No wonder the same beings that end up inspiring you also end up abandoning you, usually after you kill them in fiction. Because I would be mad too. Moving on.
Right. Okay. The interview comes with a new photo. The image shows Morpheus, Tom Sturridge, alongside the headline variant of the Dreaming
Dream.
Vivian Akaminpong. If I said the name wrong, I'm sorry. Lucian oversees a collection of every book ever imagined, written or unwritten. I mean, it doesn't look bad. I think just because it's a photo, I think in motion it would look a little better.
Again, I'm still annoyed with no effort in Dream's aesthetic, but
I mean, the robes at least look nice.
see, because I almost was willing to give the show some credit. I thought maybe he would look more human when he's on Earth, but he'd take on a more classical aesthetic when he is in his own realm. But I'm pretty sure that image is from the scene where Dream comes through the gate of the Horned Gate and notices that his castle has been destroyed, and he meets Lucian, and Lucian basically informs him what the fuck happened. And he still looks unnecessarily human. So, yeah.
Okay, so before I get to say what I was gonna say, Dragon Turtle, is he just the mystical equivalent of these Hollywood types who keep failing up? Oh, he wrote the Sandman. That worked out great for Dream. Maybe I should give him something.
I don't know, because I don't know if I'm the only one who's noticed that Neil Gaiman is kind of an accidental prophet. But judging by how adaptations of his work tend to go, it seems like the same entities that try to give him a leg up also end up usually being dissatisfied and abandoning him. Which, given that most of his stories wind up with the characters who were otherwise immortal dying in fiction, I don't blame them. Because if the purpose of giving him the inspiration is I want to get my it's essentially I want to get my name and energy out there, then I can imagine they would be pissed off when their characters inevitably die. Because it's like, but I'm supposed to be eternal and immortal, and you're writing a story where I die. What the fuck?
Moving on.
Maybe. Yep.
Well, actually, I was gonna say something. Fuck.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Right. It was something we said similar to when we did the reaction to the
Trailer.
Is like the actor for Dream looks like Dream, like in terms of facial structure and stuff.
Yeah. They just didn't bother to put him in makeup or use CG like they should have.
Yeah. Which it's a shame because I feel like it's weird. Like everything that we've seen, while it looks cheap,
Mm-hmm.
It's still. It feels like there's something there, you know.
It at least feels like there's something recognizable there, but and this is why I kind of think that the missing ingredient is in the original, Neil Gaiman had Dream helping him, and now he doesn't. So this is what Neil Gaiman can come up with on his own, namely, not as good as when he has help.
Okay. Netflix Sandman cast crew, Neil Gaiman and David Goyer, The Dark Knight, Krypton, are set as executive producers. Alan Heinberg of Wonder Woman as showrunner and head writer. The giant ensemble cast includes Tom Sturridge as Dream, Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer, Kirby Howell Baptiste as Death, Donna Eston as Despair, and Mason Alexander Perk as Desire.
And that's going to be the other thing. I wonder how villainous they're going to allow Desire to be, because the actress is actually, or the actor is actually non-binary. And I'm wondering if we can't. I'm wondering if we can't show the non-binary character as a villain is going to show up, even though Desire is a manipulative narcissist who feeds on people's unrequited desires.
Yeah. Okay, so last thing, kind of end on a more lighter note, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Something you suggested on, which is the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 trailer.
I think we did a reaction to the first Sonic trailer. This is the last one.
Not for we did it for the first movie, but not for the second.
Oh, we didn't do it for Sonic 2. Okay, well, yeah, this is Sonic 2 trailer 3 then, I guess.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I don't really care about this at all. I'm aware it's good comparatively to a lot of other things. It's just, again, I'm not a big Sonic fan.
I am. I love me some retro games, and I also love me some the video game movie genre proving itself to actually be decent. And also, again, the creative team behind the Sonic movies got immeasurable amounts of goodwill just from listening to the fan base from me. So, and everything I've seen for Sonic 2 suggests to me that they are continuing to listen to the fan base and realize that the material is actually what people want. So, yay.
I mean, I played it, like the original game. I just, again, I'm not. Game's fine. I'm just not like big and like. It's kind of the fandom for it that kind of ruined it for me.
Yeah, like so many things.
Yep. Fucking weird. Anyway, shall we banana?
Banana.
These rings signify the commitment. Sorry. Life or death situation. I need you to hurry to save me. Like right now. No. No. Okay.
I don't really have anything to say to this, honestly.
I mean, I think it's cool that they're getting more use out of the portal rings, because I wondered if they would bring that back in as a plot point, because I know they used one in the first movie to send Sonic to Earth to begin with. But cool, so they actually are bringing in more game elements. Yay, banana.
No.
Life.
Just hope we are not too late.
Oh Lord, there are two of them now. What's happening?
happening? Okay, quick version. Robotnik is back.
I discovered the source of ultimate power.
We need to get it back before the world is doomed.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
Jim Carrey is having a ball at this, and it's fun to watch him work. So,
Yeah.
You brought some kind of space porcupine.
I am an echidna warrior.
Hedgehog.
It's time to say goodbye to humanity.
Again, it's fine. I suppose. I'm just.
Mm.
I'm not invested in it, so
uh,
I'm just kind of blank faced right now.
I'm glad we're seeing Knuckles. I wonder if we'll see Shadow in the third one. Because it seems like they're actually following the game's progression pretty well. Because Knuckles was originally a villain when he first showed up, and then I imagine that just like in the games, Robotnik is gonna use one of the Chaos Emeralds to clone Sonic and create Shadow. In the third one probably, which would be cool because that's what he is in the games. Banana.
No.
Welcome to the new North. This is the moment to be the big hero.
Bad time to say this, but I don't actually have a plan. Hey, you got a little something on your leg.
No. Again, I don't know what to say really.
Banana.
No.
Someone call an Uber? It's cold in here. Let's turn up the heat.
Oh, great, the Winter Soldier.
Okay, well played, movie. Good use of reference. Banana.
No.
Fear not, citizen. You are terrible at this. Your negative attitude is not helpful.
Stick together. Unskilled. Untrained.
I like the use of color. I like Robotnik's hellish green and Knuckles' red and Sonic's blue all playing off each other. It's cool. It's very game-like. Although I don't think Robotnik's color was green in the games, if I remember correctly.
I mean, he's still wearing red and stuff. I think it's just because the Chaos Emerald.
And it's playing with the like heightened colorful nature of the game aesthetic in a realistic way without draining away the color. And we always complain about movies, despite being in color, not actually knowing how to use color. So
Yeah.
Yay. Banana.
No.
You forgot one. Unstoppable.
I'm also interested to see that the last one's box office was crippled by the pandemic starting right then and there. Like it had 1 week to play in theaters, and then the pandemic happened. Same thing with Onward. That came out right then too. So hopefully the sequel will do better now that the pandemic is all but over. Yay. Banana.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah. Sorry, I think I glitched out for like a good minute there.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Well,
Banana.
now what were you saying? I did not catch a single word you said.
Oh, I said I'm curious to see how this will do at the box office because the first one was crippled by the pandemic happened like 2 weeks after it came out.
Mm.
So I wonder how successful this will be. Also, given how good the word of mouth on the first Sonic movie was, how big does this have the potential to open? I wonder.
All right. Yeah, 10 seconds left, so I don't know if they're gonna do it. They're probably not, but just curious.
Yeah, there might be a stinger or something. Banana.
Stand still and die! For a guy named Knuckles, you are really bad at punching.
Okay.
Yep. I hope it does well enough to justify a third one, so we can get Shadow in as well.
Yeah. Not really got nothing really else to say. Like again, I'm not the biggest Sonic fan. Like I know something. Like okay, full disclosure, the most exposure I've had to Sonic was the Sonic X anime that appeared on like the CW for kids. If anyone remembers that,
Mm-hmm.
or JetX, I guess if anyone remembers
Yeah.
that. But yeah, again, I'm not like. And like, it's not really a problem with the material itself. Like, I got no real problem with it. It's just again,
You just don't have a point of reference for it, really.
that, and I don't really care about it, honestly.
Mm.
Not like I'm not invested in it. I guess
Yeah.
I just
Yeah, even if you don't care though, you should at least you should support the Sonic franchise if for no other reason than it's the one franchise that when the fans complained, they actually did something about the complaints rather than demonizing them with the toxic fandom narrative.
yeah, fair enough. All right, so with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Fuck off.